thank you. And I love your ears. I love them. They're really cool. What's your name?
Catherine.
Catherine, what a beautiful name. That's my mommy's name. Well, nice to see. How old are you, 17? 6.
Why is the President of the United States always sniffing children? Why don't the parents do anything?
By the way, this is my little sister, Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh, no, this is no, you switched on me. This is my wife. This is my sister. They switched on me. Make no mistake. If you try anything to raise the cost of precision jobs, I will veto it.
What?
Precision jobs. More timber has been burned that I've observed from helicopters than the entire state of Missouri. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one.
What the f does that even mean?
But American automobiles couldn't make enough cars because there weren't enough chips. Car prices went up. People got laid off. So did everything from refrigerators to cell phones.
Amazing.
Some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority.
What the fuck is going on here?
So fucking hands off me.
You done fucked up, man.
And treaties as law. Beg your pardon?
I think I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect. I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Back to law school, and in fact ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only need 123 credits, and I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
appreciate
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't go anywhere. It's a very exciting day around here. We'll have reaction and analysis.
The president would be ready to answer questions and assure Americans. But look what he did instead. Literally running away.
Go home to mom. Go home to mom.
By the way, where's mom?
Bye. Go home to mommy. Go home to mommy.
Mom, is she here?
Tell her to tuck you in bed. He's such a nice guy.
Mom, who's out there?
Out, out, out.
Where's mom?
Bye.
Mom.
Are you okay? You okay? Are you all right?
Come on. Well, I'm sick and tired of smart guys.
Ridiculous bull.
Come on. 10, 12, 15. Oops, stepping on a. It's black anyway.
It's black anyway.
It's black anyway.
Service team, the Eagle has landed and is making his way down the helicopter stairs. We know his history with stairs, and this could be a disaster. Stand by. Eagle has made it down the stairs. He was a little wobbly at the end, but he made it. Eagle appears to be very disoriented today. We're going to need to do like last time and point out exactly where we need him to go. Secret Service team, prepare to point. Hold that point. Perfect. No way he could miss that. Eagle will be turning in 5, 4, 3, 2. He missed his mark. He missed his mark. Eagle is wandering. Jesus Christ. All units be advised, we are going to need a pretty lady or small child of some sort with nice smelling hair to get the Eagle back on track. And we've lost visual.
Oh no, he's done it again.
Now, the very important thing I told my daughter and granddaughters, no serious guys till you're 30.
Okay.
Right?
No what?
No serious guys till you're 30.
I'll keep that in mind. At least.
Yeah, that's not creepy at all, is it? Getting into a young girl's personal space and telling her not to have any boyfriends until she's 30. And look at how the alarmed Secret Service dude tries to stop this being taped once he sees that Joe has reverted back to this peculiar behavior.
Times when he gently rearranges a young girl's hair and whispers in her ear, then rearranges some more. There's nothing pervy here. The VP knows he's on camera at these swearing-in ceremonies, and the parents are right there as he leans in for a kiss.
He's back. Yes, Creepy Joe is back. President Joe Biden went off script this week, and it went all wrong when he made these bizarro comments about a little girl while giving a speech at a military base in Virginia. Now, keep in mind, the little girl he's talking about is primary school aged.
I love those barrettes in her hair, man. I tell you what. And look at her. She looks like she's 19 years old, sitting there with her, like a little lady with her legs crossed.
Ew, what? The little girl is like 8 or 9. Let's not comment on how she crosses her legs and pretend that she looks like she's 19.
I like kids better than people. How old are you?
18.
18. How old are you? Hey, Angel, how old are you? You're 12, what's your name? How are you?
12.
Right.
Did you want to get Vice President? There we go.
Can I go with Jesse alone?
Very nice.
Grandpa's one of those guys.
That's nice of you to say.
No, I'm not saying it. He knows I mean.
Oh,
I genuinely mean.
that's good. Yeah.
Do you know what my dad used to say? His granddaughters have one important job. Take care of the pop. The most important. This is a long day, a lot of walking. That's right, everybody. Don't tell anybody.
Oh.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
You jump in the middle, Angel. You come right on this side of mommy. No, you come over here. That's it. Keep going. You're standing right next to me. There you go.
We met before. It's hard to forget those eyes.
Do you remember that, Jordan? No, not smile. No date till you're 30. Problem is, you know, you guys, you got a hard time.
All right.
Their trust and confidence. I've got a lot of thanks to give out here. First and foremost to my perfect wife.
Found out that this midnight basketball isn't getting them together, a bunch of jive folks living in their city to do, try to see if they can be Michael Jordan. When they found out, they were keeping schools open. So gangs come off streets instead of out raping my mother, marauding me, robbing the local store. They're in a gymnasium. And my daughter will be safer. My wife will be safer. My mother will be safer. And I will be safer. And I will be happy. If Haiti just quietly sunk into the Caribbean or rose up 300 feet, it wouldn't matter a whole lot. Is it because blacks are involved in Haiti? The largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. He knows there are two basic steps here. One step is you must take back the streets. And you take back the streets by more cops, more prisons, more physical protection for the people. He also understands what my friend from Texas understands, and he doesn't talk a lot about, but he signed on to in this bill. He also understands there's a need to keep people who are first-time offenders, who are nonviolent offenders, or who are potential first-time offenders who haven't gotten, I yield myself an additional 3 minutes, who in fact are people who are getting themselves into the crime stream for the first time, that they should be diverted from the system. So I hope this crime bill, when it passes, the Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended once and for all this notion that is a hangover from the 60s, that somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976 that's come out of this Congress, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill, and has had a majority vote of the Democratic members of the United States Senate on the bill. So one of the things I want to do in addition to end the crime is end the political carnage that goes on when we talk about crime. Crime is not Democrat or Republican. Making the streets safe is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is one of those issues I hope this passage of this bill will be taken out of the gridlock category and moved into an emerging consensus. And the consensus is as follows, and I will cease when I finish this statement. The consensus is, A, we must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street.
So if Biden loses just 2% more of the black vote, Trump wins. But this looks like a free-for-all. So what's Biden's plan to shore up his African-American base? The Biden campaign filmed him buying fried chicken for a black family in North Carolina.
Well, I mean, you got chicken fingers, you got the whole deal. I went the route of making sure I had the hamburger. So tell me about you guys. What you doing these days?
I'm playing AAU basketball right now.
Are you really? Are you guard?
Yes, sir.
I mean, they should have just had Hillary over with the hot sauce at that point.
Seen record lows in unemployment, particularly, and I've focused on this my whole career, particularly for African Americans and Hispanic workers and veterans. You know, the workers without high school diplomas, the lowest unemployment rate in 70 years.
President, you started your remarks here today by saying it was good news today with the economic report. Why do you think most people still don't feel positive or feel good news about the economy?
Well, first of all, you just heard the news today, too. They haven't heard it. I think the people, those 300,000+ people who got jobs, feel better about the economy. Look, I got to choose my words here. You all are not the happiest people in the world. I mean, I get it, but if you just listen to what's going on around the world.
We'll teach Donald Trump a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
We'll teach Donald Trump a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
We'll teach Donald Trump a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
A lot of people died, and a lot more are going to die unless he gets a lot smarter, a lot quicker.
So, Mr. President? Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years, you've done nothing.
Former President Donald Trump has been convicted of 34 felonies in the state of New York. My name is attorney Hugo Lord, and I'll discuss the legal steps that happens next, not the politics. The legal question many ask is, what happens next, and will the former president actually go to jail? On July 11th, the former president will be sentenced by the judge in this case. And it is only the judge, not the jury, that will decide what that sentence will be. The former president has been convicted of a Class E felony, and it's important to remember that 70 to 90% of Class E convicted felons in the state of New York actually do not receive jail sentences. But of course, that is all going to depend on what the judge takes into account while deciding what his sentence will be, such as his prior history, as well as how egregious the crime is. Even though many are asking whether or not the president will serve jail time, it is way too early to discuss that. After the former president has been sentenced by the judge and he's going through the appeals process, the president's lawyers will likely apply for what's called a bail pending appeal, which means he can apply for bail instead of serving his sentence while he's going through the appeal process. The former president is entitled to one automatic appeal, and if that does not go in his favor, then he has the ability to apply for the New York State Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in the state of New York. That court does not have to hear his case, but they can if he wants to. Consequently, it is extremely unlikely that former President Trump will serve any type of sentence before the November election. This will likely go well into 2025.
My president's got street credit now. He's been convicted of 34 counts. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there in the streets that were convicted too. So now you can relate to President Trump.
I think you stand with Trump.
I'm not stupid.
I could tell the minute I saw you, your eyes lit up when you saw the Trump flags. As I told her, you know why you stand with Trump? Because beautiful people stand with Trump.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? So what was your answer? Why do you stand with Trump?
I stand with Trump because he's basically representing us, and everything that they're doing to him is what they can do to us. Yeah. And the system is broken, and, you know, he's fighting for us, you know? So I like his policies. I like how he says it like it is, and, you know, and Biden gotta go. I'm sick of him.
And what would you say to a black person that says that you're not black because you're voting for Trump?
Well, then I guess I identify as a white man. I don't know. I don't care what anybody has to say. I'm a mother. I care about the future of my child, and I care about policies over, you know, rhetoric.
Well said.
Hey, do you know how many times Joe Biden's fallen down on national TV?
I lost count.
Take a guess.
I would say just to be, you know, you said, yeah, just to be conservative.
Yeah.
I would say maybe about 10 times.
Ding, 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 you want a free keychain?
Donald Trump keychain.
This is squarely Trump's making. This has nothing to do with his base. It has nothing to do with protecting American democracy like happened on January 6th, according to them. This has to do with Trump making his bronzer-stained bed with a porn star, trying to cover it up, and then getting caught doing it.
And out of interest, before I go to Michael, out of interest, why is Bill Clinton able to have sex with an intern in the Oval Office when he's president and lie to the American people about it on national television? And why is he able to pay off Paula Jones $850,000, 4 times as much, 5 times as much as the Trump payment to Stormy Daniels, to get rid of a sexual harassment claim, again, while he's president? And he has no criminal court recourse for that. Why is that deemed to be better than what happened with Trump and Stormy?
I don't think anyone is making that case, Piers. I'm
No,
not
I'm
here
asking
to defend
you, what's
Bill
the
Clinton
difference? What's the difference?
Or any predator. The difference is that he didn't cook the books financially using his own, using back channels in order to pay.
So paying
that
somebody off who
person
says you sexually harassed her, paying nearly $1 million while you're the president of the United States, and then having sex with an intern in the Oval Office and lying about it, that's fine because he's a Democrat.
Piers, only the leftists in your mind are making that argument.
Sorry?
Who's going to win the White House in 2024?
Who do you think will win the White House in 2032? Which type of AI? Transformers or diffusion?
Today I'll be ranking my top 10 reasons on why Joe Biden truly sucks. Guys, trying to just pick 10 reasons was truly hell, but here we go. Coming in hot at number 10 is Joe Biden running his presidential campaign as the great unifier, and then when he becomes president, doing everything but unifying. He consistently calls out mega Republicans and continues to divide the country more than it's ever been in recent history. Number 9, Joey needs votes in the midterms. Joey promises students free college. Problem is, Joey knows he doesn't have the authority to forgive student loans, so it's been held up in the courts. For number 8, I'm going to refer you to this video.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was excuse me.
That's right. Number 8 is bumbling idiot. Now, following that bumbling idiot trend, coming in at number 7 is Biden choosing Kamala Harris as his vice president. She may have accomplished nothing in her vice presidency, but at least she can tell a good fake story.
And I said, well, why are conservatives bad, Mommy? Because I thought we were supposed to conserve things.
Coming in at number 6 is Joe Biden taking money from the Chinese government. China has donated over $54 million to UPenn, where the Biden Center is located. Number 5 is Biden's racist remarks, specifically against the black community. You think I meant Trump? No, I meant Biden. Take a look.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids. Problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump. And you ain't black.
We'll get into the meat and potatoes here, guys. Number 4 is the Chinese spy balloon that was allowed to fly over the entirety of the continental U.S., with the Biden administration doing virtually nothing. Now, as our commander-in-chief, you could have shot it down a lot earlier. But I do understand that means you wouldn't have received as much money from China. Hey, guys, the top 3, these 3 things really grind my gears. And I'm Aaron Gear, so I know. Number 3 is the inflation crisis that has struck our country. Record high gas prices, grocery prices, interest rates. But don't worry, because Biden says he's adding a lot of jobs. What he doesn't tell you is that those jobs are virtually all minimum wage and are just jobs that we're regaining from the COVID crisis. Coming in at number 2 is a classic, the southern border crisis. While Kamala Harris flies to South America 1 time in the past 2 years to figure out the root causes, millions of illegal immigrants have flooded our country. And the number 1 reason why Joe Biden truly sucks is his overseeing of the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. On that day, our commander-in-chief oversaw the deaths of 13 of our servicemen and women and let Afghanistan fall to Taliban rule. You don't hear about this anymore in the media. We're not supposed to talk about Afghanistan anymore. But I want to just say that we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it until the next presidential election, and we're going to keep talking about it for decades after that. Because he's supposed to be our commander-in-chief, and he failed us.
We had a good economy. Biden wrecked it. Am I wrong? Biden printed a lot of money, and I think you have to expect inflation, and we got it big time. And the Fed is raising rates like they haven't done in 40 years. And when you do that, stuff starts to break. And we're in an unusual situation because there's so much money sloshing around. When you print $4 trillion, it's actually hard to spend it all. So it's out there still sloshing around.
I'm going to raise some taxes. Many of you are billionaires out there. You're going to stop paying at 3%. Not a joke. The idea that a billionaire, we used to have 600 or so in the United States of America, now there's 1,000. The idea that they pay at a rate that is lower than the rate of a police officer, a school teacher, a nurse, is bizarre.
Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the ballot, sir?
Do you take any blame for inflation, Mr. President?
Am I taking blame for inflation? No.
Why not?
Because it was already there when I got here, man. Remember what the economy was like when I got here? Jobs were hemorrhaging. Inflation was rising. We weren't manufacturing a damn thing here. We were in real economic difficulty. That's why I don't.
Mr. President, as you know, last Tuesday, the annual inflation rate came in at 8.3%. The stock market nosedived. People are shocked by their grocery bills. What can you do better and faster?
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No, I'm not saying it is good news, but it was 8.2 or 8.2 before. I mean, it's not. Maybe I can make it sound like all of a sudden, my God, it went to 8.2%. It's
the highest inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that, but guess what we are? We're in a position where for the last several months it hasn't spiked. It has just barely, it's been basically even.
Is the economy going to get worse before it gets better?
No, I don't think so. We hope we can have what they say, a soft landing, a transition to a place where we don't lose the gains that I ran to make in the first place for middle-class folks, being able to generate good-paying jobs and expansion.
And you would tell the American people that inflation is going to continue to decline?
No, I'm telling the American people that we're going to get control of inflation, and their prescription drug prices are going to be a hell of a lot lower, their health care costs are going to be a lot lower, their basic costs for everybody, their energy prices are going to be lower. So to continue to put people in a position to be able to make a decent living and grow and increase their capacity.
The U.S. economy is doing well. President Biden wants to know why so many Americans are still feeling bad, because there's only two groups that are actually doing well in today's economy: people who own stocks and people who happen to buy a house before 2020. Everybody else is suffering. Let me explain. The stock market has done very well in the last 4 years, but 93% of the wealth is owned by the richest 10%, so good for them, but that doesn't help everybody. And then the housing market has gone up 44%, so for people who own houses, that's amazing, but it priced out so many Americans. So it brings us back to the main question: why are so many Americans feeling bad? Because you're ignoring the fact that gas has gone up 48% in the last 4 years. Electricity is up 28%. Baby food is up 30%. Groceries is up 20%. And the big one, rent is up 21%. So these home prices went up in value that you're celebrating, but yet there's 120 million Americans that are now iced out of ever being able to buy a house, which used to be a staple of the middle class. And if you didn't get a 30% increase in your pay from 2020 till today, you actually got a pay cut. That's why you're feeling the pain today. So we need to celebrate homeowners. We need to celebrate people in the stock market, but you can't ignore 150 million Americans who are struggling to put gas in their car, feed their children, get groceries, and pay rent.
He said Lincoln Riley. But the key thing that happened, Brian, is in that moment after he said her name wrong, he said an American murdered by an illegal. And then he went on to say thousands have been murdered by illegals. So Joe Biden in that moment, and I don't know if we want to call it dementia, he went off script and he told the truth for the first time. And the Democrats are losing their mind because he said illegal.
Joe, I didn't eat today, Joe. You know why, Joe? You want to know why? The gas, Joe. I got a car, Joe. Look at me, Joe. Joe, my feet is on land. My feet is on land. I can run into I can run into a landmine. This is all on you, Joe. I hope you're paying for my funeral, Joe. Now I gotta walk these streets because the gas price is too high. Why are you doing us like this, Joe?
Former White House economic advisor Stephen Moore is criticizing President Biden for, quote, killing the American dream of home ownership, in part because of sky-high rising interest rates. A 30-year fixed mortgage loan now 7.7%, which is the highest seen in decades. So as Americans try to grapple with that reality, household debt totaled $17 trillion in the year's second quarter. So explain to our viewers why it's becoming so expensive to own a home.
Well, it's important for people to connect the dots here.
Yeah.
Joe Biden came into office and he spent and borrowed $6 trillion, Rachel. We've talked about this on your show before. Never before have we seen this kind of massive borrowing and spending spree in Washington. And a lot of that money was just printed. And so what happened was the Federal Reserve had to raise interest rates as the inflation went through the roof. And one of the impacts of those higher interest rates has been what you were just talking about, Rachel, is that the mortgage rate. Do you know what the mortgage rate was when Trump was president, by the way, Rachel?
What was it?
3%.
Wow.
3.
I remember because I bought a house during that period.
Yeah, exactly. It was 3%. Now it's almost 8%. And so the calculations that I put together show that for most people, who, let's take somebody who's in their 30s and 40s, maybe a first-time home buyer, they want to buy a house for the first time for their family. Their mortgage payment under Trump would have been maybe somewhere around $1,200 a month. You know what it is now, Rachel? $2,400 a month. So it's doubled. And that's, as you said at the outset, this is kind of an assault on the American dream of homeownership. People can't afford it. People can't afford these higher rates, and it's causing real havoc right now in the housing market.
It is. And it's also so depressing for young people who, look to where their parents were starting off their life and and buying a home and getting things going on. And they can't do that. They're stagnated. They're living with their parents still, or they're renting and they don't want to. So there's obviously a political component to this. Are you seeing the Biden administration doing anything on the economic front to reverse this trend, to correct it, if nothing else, because it doesn't look good in this coming election?
Well, you would think they would, right? I mean, the first obvious step, Rachel, would be to take a chainsaw out of this federal budget and cut as much spending as we possibly can to bring. Just in the last month, we borrowed, $500 billion. So this is insanity, and everybody knows it. But Biden, just look at the aid package. Republicans say we have to pay for this. We're not just going to keep writing checks. And Biden's saying, no, we're just going to keep borrowing and borrowing. So this is a big problem. And it comes on the heels, Rachel, of a kind of lousy jobs report showing the economy is slowing down. Yeah. So if I were the Democrats, I'd be very nervous. You've got 70% of Americans today, and they've been saying this for the last year and a half, who say the U.S. economy is headed in the wrong direction. And they're saying it, Rachel, because they're getting financially squeezed by this high inflation.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about the debt, but I really don't think Americans understand how much we're borrowing and how much we're paying every month on that debt. It's in the billions, and it's just strangling us, and it's strangling Americans and young people who are trying to get.
Rachel, it's the single biggest, fastest growing component of our federal budget right now. It's not defense, it's not healthcare, it's not education, it's not building roads. It's just paying interest on the debt. I mean, you can't run a country like that.
No, can't run a family like that. Can't run a country like that.
Exactly.
I know. Right. Stephen, thanks for warning us. I wish you could do more about it. Maybe next time.
So why would a president who claims he's a capitalist nominate a woman who wants to destroy capitalism as the chief federal regulator of all our national banks? Hawley Amarova is President Biden's nominee for controller of the currency. That office specifically charters, regulates, and supervises all national banks, all federal savings associations, and federal branches and agencies of foreign banks as well. Ms. Amarova was educated in the old Soviet Union. She received a Lenin Personal Academic Scholarship and wrote her thesis on Karl Marx. She has said she wants to put an end to all private banking and wants to set up a, quote, National Investment Authority. Now, one of the purposes of that authority, we are now finding out, could be to help put small oil and gas companies out of business. Listen.
For certain troubled industries and firms that are in transitioning. And here what I'm thinking about is primarily coal industry and oil and gas industry. A lot of the smaller players in that industry are going to probably go bankrupt in short order. At least we want them to go bankrupt if we want to tackle climate change, right? The way we basically get rid of those carbon financiers is we starve them of their sources of capital.
We want them to go bankrupt. That's she's talking about American industry that employs 6 million people.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
But check this out. The U.S. Congress recently passed a spending bill authorizing checks to be cut to the tune of $1.7 trillion U.S. dollars. That's more than 2 trillion Australian dollar dues to keep the U.S. government going. To give you an idea of how absurd this bill is, it includes $3 million for an museum in New York, more than $3.6 million for a Michelle Obama trail, and authorization for the creation of a Ukrainian Independence Park. Great. The bill also sets aside $200 million for the Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund and $7.5 million for studying, quote, the domestic radicalization phenomenon. Also, the word salmon, yes, the fish, appears at least 48 times.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
Ukrainian government. This is for Ukraine's government to operate. These tax dollars, the American tax dollars, fund a variety of things, including pensions for Ukrainian people. Why should U.S. taxpayer dollars foot the bill for pensions in any other country but Ukraine when we have our own pension shortfalls here at home? So we're looking at budget priorities. Yeah. And not like we're flush with cash. The only way to pay our bills is to borrow more money ourselves. Why should we borrow money to pay for Ukrainian pensions?
Well, it's a very fair question. I think in general, stepping back from that particular, but I will come right back to that. The Ukrainian government is running a $5 billion budget deficit every month. Part of what its budget goes for, as here, is to take care of vulnerable elderly people.
There's vulnerable people all over the world. And frankly, there are people very vulnerable in war zones. Why are we paying to operate the Ukrainian government?
Well, we are the world's largest humanitarian donor, well and apart from Ukraine. So we are invested in helping vulnerable people. That's part of what the United States does around the world.
I think that's a lot of money that we shouldn't be spending.
No, we're not. We're not spending that money on pension.
It's a non-answer.
No, it's not a non-answer.
So let's move on.
No, you're mischaracterizing what we're doing. We are not spending those sums of money on pension.
We're paying to operate
I
the
understand
government.
that's a subset. We're also paying for
paying
generators.
for a whole lot. There's $113 billion. I didn't ask you about the other money. I asked you about the money we're paying to operate.
December 2020, the last full month in office for Donald Trump, inflation was 1.4%. The average for the whole year with Trump was 1.2%. Biden drove it up to a 40-year high. He lies and says, we took over a problem. We've been working on it. He created a problem because the first thing that he did was, you guys know this story, they killed our energy independence. They killed the XL pipeline, 10,000 jobs and all the energy, froze student debt collection with $800 billion bailout for the kids that went to college. Nothing for the kids that couldn't afford to go to college but wish they could have. He rejoined the Paris Climate Accords, which again killed industry in the United States, then opened up pathways for illegals to gain citizenship, opened up the borders for millions to come in on the government dole, halted construction of a border wall, and that was all day one. That was on the first day. Those were all executive acts, like the devil went into the Oval Office. So for the first 6 months in office, inflation went from 1.4 to 5.4. I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers. Let me just tell you, when he says inflation's gone down under our watch, they drove it up to 9%, almost double digit by June. It's fallen down to 6.5%. Now get this again. Trump 1.2, Biden 6.5, and he's taking credit for driving down inflation only because he drove it up to the critical point where we almost had a seizure.
We have convicted a former president of the United States of America. We've gone over a cliff. The question as to whether or not America will react to this, whether his numbers will go up or down, I don't know. But I do know what I know. And what I know is that this case is riddled with errors. It is reversible. It will not get through to the appellate division in the First Department in New York, or certainly the Court of Appeals before the next year. And people say, should it go to the Supreme Court? No, it can't go to the Supreme Court unless they exhaust all of the state court appeals. I've spent 32 years in this system, and I am totally disillusioned. You had a judge and you had a DA who literally campaigned on making sure that this president would be indicted. We've got an attorney general who did the same thing. This is a new era in America, and I think it goes against the ilk of who we are as Americans and our faith in the criminal justice system.
This is El Paso, Texas, in the United States. This is what's going on under our secure border here, our southern border into Mexico. Look at this, goes on and on.
I love you, Joe Biden. Thank you for everything, Joe Biden. I want to be a good person here in the United States. I came here because I want quality life. You know, America is a land of opportunity.
And then take a look at this remarkable video we shot at one of the breaches in the border wall out here in Lukeville. Border Patrol and federal contractors were trying to fix it. As it was happening, groups of illegal immigrants started streaming through that breach, through that gap, trying to get into the country so they could take advantage of the situation happening while Border Patrol was watching there. You'll notice at the end of the clip a human smuggler dressed in black on the other side of the wall. After all his clientele gets through, he looks at our camera, he gives us a little shrug, and then he salutes us.
Those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard.
2 months ago, my team began to work with a bipartisan group of senators to put together the toughest, smartest, fairest border security bill in history. It includes an additional 1,300 border patrols. We need more agents on the border. It also gives me, as president, the emergency authority to shut down the border until it could get back under control. If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly.
This is Nelia Biden, Joe Biden's first wife, and her story is tragic. Just weeks after being elected to the Senate in 1972, Biden's wife, their daughter, and 2 sons were out shopping for a Christmas tree when a tractor-trailer crashed into their car. His sons, Bo and Hunter, survived with serious injuries, but his wife and 13-month-old daughter, Naomi, didn't. The truck driver was never charged in the crash, and there was said to be no alcohol involved. Nelia was just 30 years old, so here's a clip of President Richard Nixon calling Joe Biden after the tragedy.
Could you get the new senator from Delaware, Mr. Biden, on the phone, please?
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. President. How are you? Senator, I know this is a very tragic day for you, but I wanted you to know that all of us here at the White House were thinking about you and praying for you, and also for your 2 children. And that family, we know that I understand you were on the Hill at the time, and your wife was just driving by herself. But in any event, I mean, looking at it as you must in terms of the future, because you have the great fortune of being young. I remember I was 2 years older than you when I went to the house. But the main part is you can remember that she was there when you won a great victory, and you enjoyed it together, and now I'm sure that she'll be watching you from now on. Good luck to you. Thank you very much.
I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do. I don't make money from Russia. You made $3.5 million, Joe. And your son gave you, they even have a statement that we have to give 10% to the big man. You're the big man, I think. I don't know, maybe you're not, but you're the big man, I think. Your son said we have to give 10% to the big man. Joe, what's that all about? It's terrible.
Today, Biden overslept and was late to an 11 o'clock speech. He didn't show up until an hour later. And if you look closely, you can see the CPAP creases on his face. He wears a machine around his noggin to keep him breathing at night. He has sleep apnea. And if he has a creasy face at noon, he just got out of bed. He kept Bernie Sanders waiting an hour. That's either a power move by Biden or that's just sleepy. The president didn't fly home from a West Coast campaign stop last night late. Yesterday, the president did nothing. He had a phone call. That's it. Now, I wouldn't be sleeping in at this stage of the campaign.
Down the ramp. And we have people lined up on the left over here. Some union leaders and workers.
Hey, guys and ladies.
mark is going to be the blue one to the left.
How y'all doing?
You got a blue mark, and that's okay.
I'll stand my blue mark, and then I'm going to say hello to each one of you.
Yes, sir. I'll help you get started.
My son was in Iraq. He spent a year there. He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes. Really? And I resent.
Are you talking
like
about
hell.
Hunter? Are you talking about Hunter?
I'm talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Beau. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. It wasn't dishonorably.
Cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. And once you became vice president, he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
that is simply
and various
not
other places.
True.
He made a fortune.
My son.
And he didn't have a job.
My son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him.
But why was he given tens of millions?
All right, but he wasn't given tens of millions of dollars. That is totally discredited.
You've already been
totally discredited.
That made me aware when I was in law school. Proudly for Holloway. Proudly for your dad. First African American state senator in the state of Delaware. Everything about. And by the way, I sit on the stand, and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap.
They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap.
They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
We keep talking about this thing as being north versus south. That's not the issue. It is rural versus urban. And most of the busing that's taken place to date has taken place in rural areas, whether it's be administratively ordered or court ordered. Now we're moving into applying the same standards to urban areas. And it is a standard that doesn't make sense. It doesn't apply. It doesn't hold. We're moving from trying to, in urban areas, we've had integrated facilities but segregated neighborhoods. And in rural areas, we've traditionally had integrated neighborhoods but segregated facilities. And they've applied the same standard and the same test. So this north-south thing is not really the issue. As Professor Nathan Glazer at Harvard has indicated, as Dr. Armour of the RAND Corporation, as James Coleman, as I just held 3 days of hearing, two days of hearings in the Judiciary Committee on another bill I have, beyond this that deals with busing. And there is uniform opinion of those who testified that it is not a north-south, it's an urban-rural question, a distinction.
But no matter what your intent, there are going to be those who say it's a segregated thing, it's a question of race, and that you have set back the movement of desegregation of schools. How would you answer that?
The way I answer that is I predict that the young black leadership of America will overwhelmingly decide with me. I predict that in 1980 and 84, my position will be totally vindicated by the sociologists and by the civil rights advocates. I come from that side of the track. That's where I'm from. I was a defense lawyer. I handle civil rights cases. I sat in on Route 40. I mean, I'm not from the other side of this. And I happen to think that the one way to ensure that you set the civil rights movement in America further back is to continue to push busing, because it's a bankrupt policy. And that's why I think I'll be vindicated. I don't include myself with pro or anti-busing forces. I think the only group that can determine whether or not a constitutional violation exists is the federal courts of the United States of America. No one else has that right. Secondly, a federal court of the United States of America in determining a violation of the Constitution with regard to school desegregation cases must find that there is a specific intent to segregate before they can order busing. That I abide by, that I legislate by, that I hold by. And they're the standards we should repair to. It's difficult to establish intent, but it's clearly possible. Factually, it can be established. The Supreme Court 8-0 ruled yesterday that they must find that. And you very well know, as covering this area as long as you have, that there are legal standards by which you bring in burdens of proof to establish whether or not there was a specific intent.
This is how you know Joe Biden's a loser. Right before the elections, right before his first debate with Donald J. Trump, he decides to say, you know what, for 3.5 years, I did nothing for the border, and now he wants to do some sort of border security. Let me guess. Let me see how many fools actually believe this guy. Is it because maybe he has the lowest approval rating in U.S. history? Oh, yeah. He has nothing. There's nothing left. All he can try to do is do whatever he can to lie to the American people. Oh, now he cares about the border. And just like he did with the gas, what did he do? He drained the oil reserves in order to artificially bring down the prices. He is losing. The Democrats are losing. They're doing whatever it takes, even lie and manipulate the American people to get elected again, and even put in the greatest president of all time in prison. But you know what? It's backfiring.
There are talks that Joe Biden is going to issue an executive order to shut down part of the asylum process on the United States-Mexico border. And my question is, why now? Why now, Joe Biden? Is it because you made the mistake of turning Donald Trump into a felon? And that your Democratic Party didn't even know how to respond to the jury verdict? Alex Soros goes on Twitter and tells you guys that you should refer to him as a felon and keep drilling that in so the American people know that they are voting for a felon. I am voting for a felon. They play it off like we don't have a border crisis anymore, but we clearly do. Ask anyone on the southern border. You have droves of Chinese and Iranian men that are coming in now. So what about the 184,000 gotaways? You know, the people that decided not to go through the correct channels? You think they came over here and did that because they wanted to do good things on United States soil? Why now, Joe Biden? You never gave a fuck about the American people before, so all of a sudden you do? Oh, that's right. It's an election year.
Look, they've been telling the American people that there's no crisis along that border now for 3 years. And then they've tried to convince the American people that they can't take executive action. And we've had somewhere between 10 and probably 13 million illegal aliens cross that border. And now, 5 months out from an election, now they're serious about border security. I don't buy it. I don't think the American people buy it. But there are holes in this plan. This plan does nothing to stop the asylum abuse, does nothing to stop the parole abuse that this administration has done, nothing to stop catch and release. So I see a lot of different holes here. I don't think it's going to work. It's a little too little, too late.
So if Americans really want to solve the problem, there's only one solution: remove Joe Biden. Because he doesn't want to solve the problem. If he did, he would have solved it years ago. He doesn't want to do that because the progressive left wants to let everyone in to change the demographics of the country. All right, they feel that they will harvest more votes down the road with a higher percentage of foreign nationals in the USA. That's why they're doing it. So, you know, sure, Biden comes out in October and says, look at the stats, illegal crossings are down. Who's going to buy this? You already got 10 million in here, shouldn't be here. Who would say, oh, yeah, Joe, we'll give you another 4 years? Come on, it's just ridiculous.
Here we go. Breaking news. I want to know what all of you think about this. Let me run it down for you. President Biden says he will now allow the temporary closure of the border at the southern border. Many people are arguing he's had all these years to do it. Why is he doing it now? Well, they'll say it's most likely because he is coming up on re-election. President Biden's executive action would shut down the border at 2,500 daily crossings. So he is really not shutting down the border. He is limiting the border to 2,500 people crossing per day. So 2,500 people, illegal migrants, will still be allowed to walk into the country illegally per day. The Border Patrol says illegal crossings surpassed 5,000 daily in April, 1.5 million so far this year. President Biden faces bipartisan pressure amid record migrant encounters.
Rebecca put a teacher's creed into words when she said, there's no such thing as someone else's child.
There's no such thing as someone else's child.
There's no such thing as someone else's child.
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 Our nation's children are all our children.
Our nation's children are all our children.
Our nation's children are all our children.
Lisa Booth joins me this morning. Lisa, look, I say the reason for Trump's prosecution is political bias. You're not going to disagree with me, are you?
I think it's worse than bias. I think the system has been corrupted, it's been commandeered, it's been overtaken by radicals who hate this country and are actively trying to burn it to the ground. And I think that America is no longer the republic that our founding fathers envisioned. I mean, we are a centralized government marching towards authoritarianism and communism, and it is so much worse than I think people are even discussing. The only way you can rebuild or try to right a ship is if you view things from an actual lens of where we are. So I don't think that, you know, and by no means am I suggesting there's an intentional downplaying, but I'm just saying the only way you can change things is if you are honest and confront the way things currently are.
Okay. Next, jury selection, as you know, is underway in the Hunter Biden gun trial. Now, he's charged with making false statements in order to purchase a firearm. He's also accused of illegally obtaining a firearm while addicted to drugs. Is this going to be a political embarrassment for his father, the president?
I don't know. Will it be stressful for him? Yes. He's obviously not in good health, right? I mean, the special counsel told us that, right? He's an elderly man who's not fit to stand trial. Although he should, because he's evil and corrupt. I mean, look at the media's framing of this already. Oh, he was in a really bad place at the time, Stuart. You know,
excuse him.
Yeah, he was on drugs. He was reeling from the death of his brother. That is what led him to lying. That is what led him to, to abusing, the system. That is what led him to wrongdoing. It was because he was so troubled. He was in such a hard time. So that's going to be the narrative from the media. So I don't know what percentage of the country buys that. We'll see.
Hunter Biden's ex-wife could testify this morning at the criminal trial of the president's son, accused of lying about his drug use when he bought a gun in 2018. Jurors yesterday heard the defendant himself describe his past addiction.
Facing 3 felony charges and the prospect of prison time, it was Hunter Biden's own voice that was a key part of evidence presented Tuesday. Prosecutors called an FBI special agent as their first witness who played clips from Biden's 2021 audiobook of his memoir, Beautiful Things, in which he recounts his descent into crack cocaine addiction the same year he purchased the gun.
In which he recounts his descent into crack cocaine addiction the same year he purchased the gun.
In which he recounts his descent into crack cocaine addiction the same year he purchased the gun.
I used my superpower, finding crack anytime, anywhere.
Finding crack anytime, anywhere.
Finding crack anytime, anywhere.
Less than a day after landing at LAX in the spring of 2018.
The First Lady and Hunter Biden's wife sat behind the president's son as the passages were played for the jury.
There are few things more effective before a jury than being able to show the jury what the defendant said. In this case, hearing the defendant's own voice describing his struggles with addiction.
Biden has pleaded not guilty to charges he made false statements on this federal background form by not acknowledging his drug use when applying for a Colt 38 handgun in October 2018. And then unlawfully possessing it. On Tuesday, the infamous laptop that Hunter Biden left at a Delaware repair shop in 2019 was also introduced into evidence. The FBI agent testified it contained messages detailing Biden's drug addiction. In his opening statement, Biden's defense attorney, Abby Lowell, told jurors Biden didn't knowingly violate the law, that Biden had been in rehab, and that the background form asked, "Are you using drugs?" not "Have you ever used drugs?"
I think from the defense's perspective, this case is going to rise or fall on whether or not the prosecutors can prove Hunter Biden's state of mind at the very moment that he made the fateful checkmark on the federal gun form.
Biden's ex-wife is next on the witness list, and later it's Hawley Biden. Prosecutors say it was Hawley who found and discarded that gun 11 days after it was purchased. She's testifying under an immunity agreement to testify about drug use.
Tonight, President Biden's only surviving son sat in a Wilmington courtroom all day with the First Lady sitting behind him as jurors heard vivid and salacious details about his addiction and alleged behavior during a period where he's facing 3 criminal charges. And they saw photos of the gun at the center of the case as prosecutors tried to use testimony from at least 3 women that Hunter Biden was involved with to establish that he was a chronic drug user when he bought this firearm back in 2018.
First Lady Jill Biden spent a 3rd day at the courthouse, again seated behind Hunter Biden, as prosecutors tried to prove he illegally purchased this Colt 38 handgun while using drugs in late 2018, lying on the application form. They called 2 women formerly in his life to the stand to help make their case. His ex-wife, Kathleen Buell, testified she found a crack pipe at their Washington, D.C. home in 2015, was rejected when she urged him to go to rehab, and would scour his car to ensure their kids didn't find drugs. But under cross-examination, Hunter Biden's attorney, Abby Lowell, got Buell to admit she never actually saw Hunter Biden do drugs.
The key evidence is going to be provided by people who are intimately close with Hunter Biden, his ex-wife, ex-girlfriends, and the like. I can only imagine that this is probably excruciatingly painful for Hunter Biden, among other people, to sit in court and hear this.
Late today, a former girlfriend, Zoe Caston, who dated him for much of 2018, testified Hunter Biden frequently bought and used crack, at times using a chopstick to clean out his crack pipe.
I went one time for 13 days without sleeping and smoking crack and drinking vodka exclusively.
Keston said the president's son was using drugs as late as September 2018, weeks before he bought the gun, and again weeks later in November 2018. Prosecutors showed the jury a series of photos of drugs allegedly used by Hunter Biden and an image from a video of a shirtless Biden, allegedly with drug paraphernalia.
It really leaves no doubt that Hunter Biden was abusing controlled substances. I mean, it doesn't really give much room for the defense to argue that he wasn't, at least at some point in time, addicted.
Still on the witness list for tomorrow is Hawley Biden, Beau Biden's widow and a woman with whom Hunter Biden had a romantic relationship when the gun was purchased. Jurors saw that gun late today, zip-tied in a box and held up by prosecutors. Now, when he was asked if he could do the job as an 85-year-old, in other words, complete a second term, Biden said, quote, "I can do it better than anybody you know. You're looking at me. I can take you." Was he picking a fight with the reporter? And then look at this. Just yesterday at the White House, he seemed confused by reporters shouting their questions at him.
What was that?
That's not good. How can Biden be president for another 4 years?
Well, he really can't, and we've seen it in all of these videos. I thought it was interesting when he said, you know, I can do this job, and I'm as good as I've ever been. I'm thinking, that's the problem. You're still Joe Biden. I feel like when I'm watching Joe Biden, I'm watching a rerun of Captain Kangaroo, and all the cast at the White House has to scream, "Wake up, Mr. President. You have a meeting, and it's going on right now." Captain Kangaroo. And remember Grandfather Clock? And Captain Kangaroo and Mr. Green Jeans would have to scream at him and say, "Wake up, Grandfather," and they'd have to wake up the Grandfather Clock.
But it's not funny. It's a serious national crisis because you could have President Kamala Harris.
That's frightening. That's not funny.
Right.
Because we recognize that he has passed his sell-by date. It's not his age, and I want to make very clear, this isn't ageism. Mick Jagger is prancing around on the stage. He's the same age as Joe Biden. Paul McCartney does 3-hour shows without an intermission, night after night. He's the same age as Joe Biden. This is about his cognitive ability, and it's gone. And you see it in the video that you rolled a moment ago, that stare off into nothingness and just sort of wandering away and saying inconsistent things. And this report was disturbing on one point when he actually told the reporter, "I can take you." And I'm thinking, what was this, a 22-year-old young lady who he could plan on taking down? But the very idea that he believes that he's stronger than ever, that is to me disturbing.
It is indeed.
Crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of our country by far, has totally surrendered our southern border. His weakness and extremism have resulted in a border invasion like we have never seen before. Other countries have emptied out their prisons, insane asylums, and mental institutions and sent us drug dealers, human traffickers, and terrorists. Millions of people have poured into our country, and now, after nearly 4 years of his failed, weak leadership, pathetic leadership, Crooked Joe Biden is pretending to finally do something about the border. But in fact, it's all about show because he knows we have a debate coming up in 3 weeks. The truth is that Joe Biden's executive order won't stop the invasion. It's weak and it's pathetic. It will actually make the invasion worse. Millions of people a year will continue to pour across our border and be released into our country. And we recently learned Biden is secretly granting mass amnesty to hundreds of thousands of these illegal aliens, along with welfare, government benefits, work permits, and jobs. He's not doing that, however, for our veterans. He's not doing that for our homeless. He's giving illegal aliens far more than our veterans get, far more than our homeless get. Many of the left are even pushing for illegal aliens to vote in our elections, which is what this is all about. That's why they're allowing up to 20 million people since he took office. When I was president, we built over 500 miles of border wall, stopped the flood of criminals, and we had the safest border in the history of our country. We need to secure our border once again. We need to secure our border once and for all. Crooked Joe will never get the job done. He doesn't want to get the job done. It's just words and misinformation, because he could have done it very easily. All he had to do is say, close the border. That's the power of the presidency. But when I'm elected, it will be my top priority. On day one, I will seal the border, stop the invasion, and send Joe Biden's illegal aliens back home. They have to be sent back home because no country can sustain the damage that our country is sustaining. All over the world, crime rates are going down because all over the world, not just South America, they're sending criminals into the United States of America. They're taking their drug dealers and their people in jail, lots of people in jail. They're taking their murderers, their killers, they're taking them all and they're sending them into the United States. In Venezuela, crime is down a staggering 67%. Because if you go to Caracas, if you go to different places, they're sending their criminals into the United States. It's a horrible thing, and that's happening all over the world, many, many places, many countries. We're not going to let it continue.
All eyes on the White House today, where President Biden is expected to make his most aggressive unilateral move yet to address immigration. We're learning the president's executive action would temporarily close the U.S.-Mexico border when daily encounters reach 2,500, reopening only when they fall below 1,500. But will this move be enough to appease either side of the aisle as immigration becomes a top election year issue? Will it make a difference?
The White House has been saying for months that it wants Congress to take action here. And you'll remember earlier this year that former President Donald Trump urged congressional Republicans to kill that bipartisan border funding deal. Well, here we are. The White House essentially saying that it needs to take action now. And you mentioned some of the details of this, that once illegal border crossings in between ports of entry cross 2,500, that this executive action will give the president authority to temporarily shut down the border, and it would remain closed until average daily illegal crossings go back under 1,500. So the Biden administration expecting legal challenges here on it.
Right now, daily crossings are averaging more than 4,000 a day. That's down from a high of around 10,000 a few months ago. But last time they dipped below 1,500 was in July of 2020 at the height of the pandemic. So does this mean the shutdown would happen immediately?
Yes, effectively, yes, Anna. The temporary shutdown would happen immediately. Illegal border crossings have been dropping since about December, but they still remain high. And look, this has become a major political issue heading into the November election, in about 5 months until the November election, and President Biden trailing former President Trump when it comes to handling of immigration in many polls, Anna.
You know, people are coming across the border at unauthorized crossings already. Will this executive action change anything practically?
Yeah, it's going to make things worse. I swear, when I heard yesterday President Biden making an executive order, I was like, oh my God, he's going to do something really fresh, different, interesting to change the conversation. Instead, Joe Biden, who has been in politics for decades, he knows better. I don't know who is advising him to say, shut down the border. This is unrealistic. What this is going to create is more chaos at the border. What if we had a process that actually said, okay, we're going to bring you in every day. Those 1,500, we're going to bring you in every day, and you're going to be relocated where your families are at. You will see that our economy will grow and our country will become safer. President Biden needs to do something fresh and different, not this, which is rehashing a former president saying we're going to shut down. He's not going to get these voters by doing this. He's just not.
4 months ago, after weeks of intense negotiation between my staff and Democrats and Republicans, we came to a clear bipartisan deal. It was the strongest border security agreement in decades. But then Republicans in Congress, not all, but walked away from it. Why? Because Donald Trump told them to. He told the Republicans, it has been published widely by many of you, that he didn't want to fix the issue. He wanted to use it to attack me. That's what he wanted to do. It was a cynical and an extremely cynical political move, and a complete disservice to the American people who are looking for us to not to weaponize the border, but to fix it. Today, I'm joined by a bipartisan group of governors, members of Congress, mayors, law enforcement officials, most of whom live and work along the southern border. They know the border is not a political issue to be weaponized. The responsibility we have to share to do something about it. They don't have time for the games played in Washington, and neither do the American people. So today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own to address the border. Frankly, I would have preferred to address this issue through a bipartisan legislation, because that's the only way to actually get the kind of system we have now that's broken, fixed, to hire more Border Patrol agents, more asylum officers, more judges. But Republicans have left me no choice. Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. Migrants will be restricted from receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. And those who seek to come to the United States legally, for example, by making an appointment and coming to a port of entry, asylum will still be available to them, still available. But if an individual chooses not to use our legal pathways, if they choose to come without permission and against the law, they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States. This action will help us to gain control of our border, restore order into the process. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage. We'll carry out this order consistent with all our responsibilities under international law, every one of them. In addition to this action, we recently made important reforms in our asylum system, more efficient and more secure reforms. The goal is to deliver decisions on asylum as quickly as possible. The quicker decision means that a migrant is less likely to pay a criminal smuggler thousands of dollars to take him on a dangerous journey, knowing that if in fact they move in the wrong direction, they get turned around quickly. And 2 weeks ago, the Department of Justice started a new docket in the immigration courts to address cases where people who've recently crossed the border they make a decision within 6 months rather than 6 years, because that's what happens now. Additionally, the Department of Homeland Security has proposed new rules to allow federal law enforcement to more quickly remove asylum seekers that have criminal convictions and remove them from the United States. My administration has also recently launched new efforts to go after criminal networks that profit from smuggling migrants to our border and incentivize people to give tips to law enforcement, provide information that brings smugglers to justice. We're also sending additional federal prosecutors to hotspots along the border and prosecute individuals who break our immigration laws. One other critical step that we will be taking, and that has made a huge difference. We continue to work closely with our Mexican neighbors instead of attacking Mexico. And it's worked. We've built a strong partnership of trust between the Mexican President Lopez Obrador, and I'm going to do the same with the Mexican-elect president who I spoke with yesterday. We've chosen to work together with Mexico as an equal partner, and the facts are clear. Due to the arrangements that I've reached with President Obrador, the number of migrants coming and to our shared border unlawfully in recent months has dropped dramatically. But while these steps are important, they're not enough. To truly secure the border, we have to change our laws, and Congress needs to provide the necessary funding to hire 1,500 more border security agents, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backlog of cases, more than 2 million of them, 4,300 more asylum officers to make decisions in less than 6 months instead of 6 years, which is what it takes now, and around 100 more high-tech detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop fentanyl being smuggled into the United States. These investments were one of the primary reasons that the Border Patrol Union endorsed the bipartisan deal in the first place. And these investments are essential, remain essential. As far as I'm concerned, if you're not willing to spend the money to hire more Border Patrol agents, more asylum officers, more judges, more high-tech machinery, you're just not serious about protecting our border. It's as simple as that. I believe that immigration has always been the lifeblood of America. We're constantly renewed by an infusion of people and new talent. The Statue of Liberty is not some relic of American history. It stands for who we are as the United States. So I will never demonize immigrants. I'll never refer to immigrants as poisoning the blood of a country. And further, I'll never separate children from their families at the border. I will not ban people from this country because of their religious beliefs. I will not use the U.S. military to go into neighborhoods all across the country to pull millions of people out of their homes and away from their families, to put detention camps and while awaiting deportation, as my predecessor says he will do if he occupies his office again. On my very first day as president, I introduced a comprehensive immigration reform plan to fix our broken system, secure our border, provide a pathway for citizenship for dreamers, and a lot more. And I'm still fighting to get that done. But we must face the simple truth. To protect America as a land that welcomes immigrants, we must first secure the border and secure it now. The simple truth is, there is a worldwide migrant crisis. And if the United States doesn't secure our border, there's no limit to the number of people who may try to come here, because there's no better place on the planet than the United States of America. For those who say the steps I've taken are too strict, I say to you that be patient. And goodwill of American people are wearing thin right now. Doing nothing is not an option. We have to act. We must act consistent with both our law and our values as Americans. I'll take these steps today, not to walk away from who we are as Americans, but to make sure we preserve who we are for future generations to come. Today, I've spoken about what we need to do to secure the border. In the weeks ahead, and I mean the weeks ahead, I'll speak to how we can make our immigration system more fair and more just. Let's fix the problem and stop fighting about it. I'm doing my part. We're doing our part. Congressional Republicans should do their part. Thank you very much.
We're taking this action on June the 4th, Mr. President. The election is on November the 5th. Why did you wait so long, Mr. President, to take this action? Why did you wait so long, Mr. President, to take this action that you're taking today?
What was that?
I asked is Prime Minister Netanyahu playing politics with the war?
I don't think so. He's trying to work out a serious problem he has.
And a reminder, the border spans nearly 2,000 miles from Southern California all the way to Texas, which means the order will impact more than 300 points of entry. So there are questions tonight on whether the U.S. even has the manpower to make this a reality.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come. And those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard. This is the first president in the history of the United States of America that anybody seeking asylum has to do it in another country.
So why the massive change? Well, here's one potential reason. Immigration is top of mind for voters. Faced with a slew of issues, the situation at the border coming in at just number 2 behind inflation. And it's a big issue, especially in an election year. Poll finding 69% say they disapprove of how Biden has handled the border, with just 5 months until the November election. Today's move comes after a record nearly 10 million migrants have crossed into the U.S. since President Biden took office. But I do want to go back to what President Biden said as a candidate and what he's doing today, now, in 2024, right before this election. Do you feel duped?
I would say we are disappointed that the administration has taken this road.
President Biden consistently has stated that he never discussed businesses with Hunter Biden's associates. That is a lie. Let me repeat that even for the colleagues across the aisle. It is a lie. Throughout our extensive investigation and from the lips of credible witnesses, it is abundantly clear that the Biden family business is Joe Biden. Let me emphasize, there is no Biden family business except for Joe Biden's 40-plus year career in Washington, D.C. That has been the family business. As a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, we have followed the paper trail. We've conducted our investigation by the book. We have discovered damning evidence, and we continue to do so every day. Our investigation has led to some alarming and eye-opening findings, which point to the president's knowledge and involvement in illegal business transactions. For example, in 2018, James Biden, the president's brother, received $600,000 in a loan from AmeriCorps, a financially distressed, failing rural hospital operator. Bankruptcy court documents suggested that James Biden received these loans based upon representations that his last name, Biden, could open doors in the Middle East based on his political connections. Now, we all know James Biden doesn't have political connections. Joe Biden, his brother, has political connections. Specifically, AmeriCorps wired a $200,000 loan into the account of James and Sarah Biden. Here's what makes the evidence damning. On the same day, James Biden wrote a $200,000 check from the same account addressed to his brother, Joe Biden. And for the American people, the brother of James Biden is the president of the United States. Next example is an email obtained by the committee from a Hunter Biden associate, mentioning that 10% of the relevant joint venture that held by Hunter for the big guy. 10% of a relevant joint venture was held for the big guy. At this point in the committee's investigation, we've established that Joe Biden is the big guy through the web of transactions that purposefully tried to hide the big guy's involvement. Let me stress again that Joe Biden is the Biden family business. Let me illustrate an example of the confusing web of transactions. A Chinese company sent $5 million to a joint venture between Hunter and an associate. That same day, the joint venture sent $400,000 to an entity that Hunter Biden controls alone. Less than a week later, Hunter Biden wired $150,000 from this entity to a company owned by James Biden and Sarah Biden, James Biden, the president's brother. Sarah Biden later withdrew $50,000 from the same company. Less than a week later, Sarah wrote a personal check to Joe Biden, aka the big guy, aka the president of the United States, for $40,000, 10% of the $400,000 that was mentioned in the email by the associate to Hunter Biden. Another example is when a confidential human source overheard a Burisma executive claiming to have bribed then Vice President Joe Biden for $5 million. As I stated earlier, Joe Biden consistently says that he never discussed businesses with Hunter Biden's associate. This was a blatant lie by the commander-in-chief, and the American people deserve to know the truth. Joe Biden never thought that the Oversight Committee would get this far in its investigation, and additional damning evidence will soon be revealed to the American people. This leads me to my next point, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or commonly known as FARA. To be clear, Hunter Biden has never, and I repeat, never registered as a foreign agent, despite his lucrative work being done on behalf of foreign interests and his many travels on Air Force Two. And that wasn't just because he missed his dad. Specifically, Hunter has been documented business transactions with a Chinese government-based energy company called CEFC. Interestingly enough, the same company, CEFC, is the same one that is affiliated with the company that sent $5 million to Hunter Biden. How is this not the definition of being and acting as a foreign agent? Paul Manafort was convicted for far less. The time is now to open up an impeachment investigation pertaining to the president's direct link to blatant corruption, pay-for-play tactics, and acting as a co-conspirator to the crimes committed by his family on behalf of Joe Biden himself. The committee will continue to do our due diligence. We will not be worried about the distractions from the Democrats and from the press. We will dig through the confusing web of Biden LLCs, which I will add, Mr. Speaker, the confusion of these companies and the confusion of these transactions were done on purpose to conceal this money from the American people. And I will also add to conceal the money from the Internal Revenue Service. Because, you know, Joe Biden likes to talk about everybody paying their fair share except him and except his son. They're not concerned about a fair share. We're going to continue to uncover all of this. And we're going to answer and uncover all of the information that is going to outline exactly why, in my opinion, representing the 19th District of Florida, why Joe Biden deserves to be impeached. Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States has taken money from foreign sources. Meanwhile, the world is on fire. Is the president compromised? Do agents in the Chinese government have the upper hand on the President of the United States while our enemies are on the move? These are serious questions that the House of Representatives has a responsibility to answer. And the way to get all that information is through the impeachment inquiry, which will continue here in the People's House.
Last year, you might recall, sir, our exchange regarding the FBI's involvement on January 6th and prior. I'm happy to jog your memory to quote, according to the record, I asked you, did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol on January 6th prior to the doors being opened? You responded, I quote, again, I have to be very careful of what I say. To which I said, it should be a no. Can you not tell the American people no? We did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol on January 6th. A year has passed. We sit here again a year later. We, the people, still do not have a definitive answer from you or anyone else in the Biden administration regarding the FBI presence and participation in the months leading up to the November election and in the weeks and days prior to January 6th and on January 6th here in D.C. We can't get a straight answer, although we have a tremendous amount of evidence harvested and reviewed over the course of the last year, which you will see. In September, Stephen D'Artano, formerly in charge of the FBI's field office in Washington, D.C., testified to the House Judiciary Committee that he was aware the FBI informants would attend the Stop the Steal rally thrown on January 6th. You confirmed that the FBI had confidential human sources at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th here in D.C., sir?
Congressman, as we've discussed before, I'm not going to get into where we have or have not used confidential human sources. But what I can tell you,
on.
You asked for a definitive
We'll move
answer.
on. It's my time. You said no, you're not going to answer. That's cool. We're watching.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the question?
Your moment will come. This is my time. Earlier this year, an FBI informant who is reported to have, quote, under oath, marched to the U.S. Capitol with fellow Proud Boys members on January 6th, close quote. He said he was communicating with his FBI handler while people were entering the U.S. Capitol. Can you confirm that the FBI had that sort of engagement with your own agents embedded into the crowd on January 6th?
If you are asking whether the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and or agents, the answer is emphatically
You're saying
not. No.
You're saying no?
Not
Okay.
violence orchestrated by FBI sources or agents.
Are you familiar with you know what a ghost vehicle is? Director of the FBI certainly should. You know what a ghost bus is?
A ghost bus?
Ghost bus.
I'm not sure I've used that term before.
Okay. It's pretty common in law enforcement. It's a vehicle that's used for secret purposes. It's painted over. These two buses in the middle here, they were the first to arrive at Union Station on January 6th, 0500. I have all this evidence. I'm showing you a tip of this iceberg.
Mr. Chairman.
These two buses
Mr.
are
Chairman.
painted completely white.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Point of order. Sure, I understand, but you'll recall that Ms. Jackson Lee's been allowed to go 2 minutes before. I've been very fair in letting people finish their questioning throughout my tenure as chairman, and I'll continue to be fair on that regard. But I will make a note to the members, if you could stay as close within your time as possible. We have a lot of people that want to ask these gentlemen questions. So with that, the gentleman yields. But your point, I've been very fair in this, Mr. Ivey, with everybody on this side of the aisle just as much.
I don't think I accuse you of being unfair, Mr. Chairman.
You're making a point. Okay, thank you. Now recognize Mr.
May I
Gray.
close this statement, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
I think your time is expired, Mr.
I note that other members across the aisle have been granted time, and I object to my question being closed. This is a very significant hearing, Mr. Chairman, and these buses are nefarious in nature and were filled with FBI informants dressed as Trump supporters. and deployed onto our Capitol on January 6th. Your day is coming, Mr. Ray.
The rules of the committee says that once the chair calls the time, it's done.
Welcome back. We are learning much more about the migrant crisis right here in Chicago, how the crisis is impacting the city and the state financially. Already this week, 41 buses have rolled into Chicago, and that means there are now 11,000 migrants living in shelters. 4,000 are still sleeping on police station floors and staying at the airport. Now, this is really startling. 30% of migrants here in Chicago are children. Majority of them are attending Chicago public schools. Right now, the state is footing the bill for what they call temporary housing, apartments and homes that are rented out for migrants. The state is paying on the high end $9,000 in rental assistance over a 6-month period of time. With that comes help moving in and a starter kit to furnish the apartment.
Cost, or I guess the payment towards the landlord, is based on market rate. It's based on the configuration of the apartment, how many rooms, where it's located, all of those things. And so it kind of varies from place to place.
We ran out of time, but I did reach out to the city to see how many asylum seekers are currently taking advantage of the rental assistance program. We haven't heard back from the city on that. The city put $4 million towards helping migrants get temporary housing. The state added $38 million to that, and right now there are only 30 to 40 case management workers working to get thousands of migrants temporary housing, and I'm told there's a push to hire more.
Tonight, New York City's mayor pushing back on criticism of a new $50 million program to hand out prepaid debit cards to migrant families.
We need to dispel the rumor that we gave American Express cards to everyone.
Adams insisting the prepaid cards would curb the cost of inefficient food distribution that has led to expensive food waste, potentially saving taxpayers roughly $7 million a year, with a limit of up to $1,000 per month for a family of 4.
If this is successful, we're going to expand it even more.
The pilot program drawing immediate criticism, including from rapper 50 Cent, who went on to social media to vent his frustration, writing, "Maybe Trump is the answer."
I told 50 Cent to hit me up.
And over the weekend, Texas Governor Greg Abbott joining the choir of criticism while on Fox News, calling the program insanity.
It may be the most reprehensible thing that I've seen take place over the past 48 hours.
It's the latest effort by New York City officials to deal with the ongoing migrant surge. More than 173,000 migrants and asylum seekers have arrived in New York City since the spring of 2022. Both the New York Democratic governor and the mayor have been pleading for federal support, insisting the city is at a breaking point.
This has hurt us. And where the White House needs to make adjustments.
The move as the search continues for migrants who were caught on camera attacking 2 New York City police officers last month. 7 suspects were arrested and 6 of those were released without bond. Police say they believe at least 6 more people were involved. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg saying she believes none of the migrants should have been released without bond.
An assault on a police officer means that she should be sitting in jail.
Bragg defending his decision while condemning the attack, saying he didn't request bail out of caution, adding he needed to send the right people to jail.
The video is the start of the process, not the end. We will continue to work to identify all those responsible and will hold them accountable for their specific roles.
Tonight, the Big Apple looking to D.C. for answers as a $118 billion bipartisan bill moves through Congress to impose tougher asylum and border laws.
California could soon pay illegal immigrants to not work. It's the latest state incentive to pay unemployed illegal immigrants up to $300 a week. The state Senate passed this measure despite the fact that the state faces nearly a $32 billion deficit. You broke this story. It's still incredibly shocking. So, unemployment benefits for illegal immigrants. Help me understand.
Yes, so this is a measure that's kind of in line with California's push on illegal immigration. Governor Gavin Newsom declared California to be a sanctuary state when he was inaugurated. California already supplies free medical insurance, Medicaid, to illegal immigrants, as well as driver's licenses. As you said, it's $300 a week for up to 20 weeks. State officials would not be allowed to contact former employers to validate their status as employees. It would be completely self-attested.
Here's what California Democrats are saying to help to their rationale to justify their program. They're saying due to historically racial exclusions, many of California's most vulnerable workers are entirely excluded from the program. So Susanna, tell us how this would work. You just mentioned they're not allowed to call your prior employers. They're not really allowed to ask about your status for a social security number. So you said self-attestation. So an illegal immigrant goes in, crosses the border illegally, comes into California, and does what to begin receiving $300 a week?
So they have to attest that they have earned at least $1,300 in the past 3 months or worked 93 hours in the past 3 months. And then they have kind of a checklist of documents that they can send to the state to start collecting. This comes, of course, after the agency that would be in charge of dispensing these checks, that's the state labor agency called the Employment Development Department. It was formerly run by President Biden's nominee to be labor secretary for the feds. Under her leadership during the pandemic, that agency was defrauded an estimated $31 billion. Yeah. The unemployment fund is actually in a $20 billion hole right now that currently California businesses are on the hook for covering. So all of that is also added context for this, and the state would have to pay considerable amount of money, according to analysts, to get the agency ready to deal with potential fraud.
So the agency in and of itself is at, what did you say, a $20 billion deficit? The state is at a $32 billion deficit. And this particular program has been defrauded by, what was it, 31, what'd you say? Was that
31 billion.
The billions are hard to keep up with. So let's go ahead and expand it to people who got into the country illegally. Just absolutely a model of competence in California.
A proposed bill working its way through Sacramento could make it easier for undocumented immigrants to purchase a home in California. It's called AB 1840.
AB 1840 adds specific wording to the California Dream for All program, which is the state's down payment assistance program. The wording would make undocumented immigrants able to apply for this money.
That it was a dream for all, that's what we meant.
Assemblyman Dr. Joaquin Arambula from Fresno is the author of AB 1840. The bill says that applicants of the state's Dream for All program should not be disqualified based on their immigration status. The Dream for All program is a down payment assistance program for low to moderate income aspiring homeowners. Those selected get a 20% down payment on a home that has to be paid back plus interest if the homeowner sells it.
We shouldn't move people to the front of the line that haven't paid their dues.
El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells, who's also running for Congress, says he disagrees with AB 1840. He says the money for the California Dream for All Act should only go to legal U.S. citizens and veterans assistance programs.
They should be first in line to buy homes and to get assistance. Work for this country, and in fact, some that come from countries that our young men and women were actually fighting against. Understand why we're letting people that have lived here all their lives, and sometimes for generations, twist in the wind and not be able to afford their own home.
So if passed and signed by the governor, AB 1840 could go into effect in January of 2025.
Sorry, to friends in Texas and along the border, we definitely feel your pain. I talked to President Trump this morning, and he says this is a scam and people will see through it. I think he's dead right. If you want the border secured and you're waiting on this group to do it, you're going to die waiting. So the policy, as I understand it, is going to be an economic boom for the cartels. This is literally some of the best things that could happen for the business of illegal immigration, because there's going to be a cap where you kind of shut it down every day. So if you're a cartel, you're going to rack and stack them. You're going to find out exactly how many can get through a day. And you say, who would like to pay more to move up to the line? The biggest beneficiary of this policy is going to be human trafficking cartels who will charge more to get in the group that's going to go through, and at the end of the day, you'll have to wait longer and pay more, but you're coming in. If you want to stop the flow, here's what President Trump said he will do on day one. They will keep coming until they see people leaving. He told me this morning, when he gets to be president, not only is he going to secure the border, he's going to deport hundreds of thousands of people here illegally. And if you want to shut down illegal immigration, those coming need to see an outflow by the tens and hundreds of thousands. That will deter. The only policy change that will work is to have mass deportations, because people will stop coming when they see people leaving.
Okay, I want you to listen up. Here's the drill. President Biden is in trouble politically. He's polling right up there with fungal infections. Part of the reason for that is that he gave in to the loon wing of his party, and he dissolved the southern border. Now, 5 months before an election, he has to appear to be willing to do something about it, hence this executive order. And he expects you to report this epiphany that he has had. Take what the White House is telling you, balance it on your noses like trained seals, and report it uncritically. For 3 years, we have watched President Biden push on a door that has been clearly marked pulled. He's mismanaged Congress, COVID, the national debt, the economy, inflation, crime, Afghanistan, Iran, the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, and now, of course, the border. And every time, I think the president has hit rock bottom. He has managed to find a shovel and continue to dig. Hence, this executive order. And I think that's what the American people see. The first question I would ask President Biden is this. It's a little late, isn't it, Mr. President? It's a little late. You can't make this cat walk backwards. The president's border policies have allowed 8 million people to come into our country illegally. If you try to come into our country today legally, you are a sucker. You are a sucker. Now, for 3 years, President Biden told us all, there is no crisis at the southern border for reasons clearly stated on the teleprompter. And his plan to deal with the crisis at the border was to pretend that there wasn't a crisis at the border. Some of you reported that. Some of you didn't. Well, when the American people figured it out, because they may be poorer under President Biden, but they're not stupid, the Biden administration shifted its strategy. It then said, well, we know there's a crisis at the border, but we don't have any authority to fix it. That didn't work either, because the American people aren't cell-deep stupid. So now he has decided to tell you that he has been born again. He has had an epiphany. He is now a border hawk, and that's what he wants you to report. Look, you can cut the hypocrisy with a knife. You know, I have seen the good side of politics, but I've also seen the dark side. I spent 25 years in the major leagues of Louisiana politics before I was sent down to the minors here in Washington. I have seen the good side, but I've seen the dark side. And this is one of the most cynical things that I have ever seen a politician attempt to do 5 months before an election. It is insulting, it is cheap, it is contemptuous. The American people see that, and I hope you do too.
It has been nearly 3 years since President Biden put Vice President Harris in charge of addressing the open southern border that we have. And now we have this executive order that President Biden wants us to believe is going to fix this. It just shows how unserious he is about addressing and securing our southern border. President Obama's National Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, said 1,000 people trying to cross the border in a single day was a crisis. This executive order is going to be 2.5 times that. President Biden isn't addressing the crisis. He's maintaining a catastrophe. In his first 100 days of office, he had issued 94 executive orders. President Trump built 500 miles of wall. President Biden stopped that with his executive order. He stopped deportations. President Trump was doing internal immigration enforcement, going after sanctuary cities. President Biden signed an executive order repealing that. He ended the Remain in Mexico policy. And what do we get when President Biden undoes all President Trump's policies that worked so effectively, that brought illegal border crossings down to a 40-year low? Well, we get nearly 10 million people who've tried to enter our country illegally. We've seen a humanitarian crisis, a drug trafficking crisis, sex trafficking, child trafficking, a national security crisis. Last year, 172 people on the terrorist watch list, the FBI terrorist watch list, tried to cross into our country. And those are just the ones we caught. Under President Trump's 4 years, that number was 14. This president is not serious. He has opened our southern border, and now, because it's election year, he is trying to show the American people that he's taking steps, but we're not going to believe it. If he were serious, he would implement the Trump-era policies that so successfully brought the numbers of illegal people crossing our border down. He is not serious. I am proud here to stand with my Republican colleagues to call on the president to get serious about securing our southern border and protect the American people, because he is failing, he is endangering our country, and the American people will not be fooled by this political ploy.
Too little, too late. Mr. President, Joe Biden, this is too little, this is too late, and the American public knows it's too late. This stunt is not going to save your political life. Thanks to you, the 11 million people that have crossed this border illegally, this is now the #1 defining issue of this presidential election. I too want to say thanks to Senator Cornyn for leading this. No one's been impacted more by this than the state of Texas. And why is this important to Kansans? There's 3 arteries that come out of the state of Texas and go right through my home in Kansas, and then it bifurcates and goes east and west, and consequently, we're seeing record numbers of fentanyl deaths, record amounts of human trafficking, and everything else that goes along with this. For over 3 years, this administration has treated our national security and sovereignty as mere afterthoughts. Our borders have been left vulnerable and the safety of our citizens compromised. And here we stand just 5 months before this critical election, with Joe Biden and the Democrats grasping for a political lifeline. Their recent announcement is nothing more than a desperate ploy to distract from their failures, but let me be once again unequivocal. This is too little, too late. This administration's neglect is a direct affront to every American family who has endured the devastation of fentanyl poisoning and violent crime linked to illegal migration. I suppose we're up to 250,000 Americans, young adults, that have died from fentanyl poisoning under Joe Biden's watch. That's 3 times more than the number of soldiers we lost in Vietnam. This president's reactions His steps are a cruel slap in the face to families like Lake and Riley's and to all families that are mourning loved ones lost to crime or fentanyl poisoning. But make no mistake, the only ones celebrating Joe Biden's so-called solutions are the cartels. These criminal organizations have taken control of our border operations, turning them into a sophisticated enterprise of human trafficking and drug smuggling. This is not about securing our borders. This is about Joe Biden's enabling organized crime. Now, despite their claims, the policy represents nothing more than a superficial gesture, allowing 2,500 illegal aliens to cross the borders between the ports of entry. That's just 2,500 between the ports of entry. That's not counting the number of people that are coming in through the ports of entry. It's not counting the number of gotaways, known or unknown gotaways. This translates to over 1 million illegal entries per year under Joe Biden's watch. This isn't just negligence, it's complicity. Joe Biden is not failing to stop this invasion. He's actively facilitating the invasion. By ignoring the crisis, he's empowering the very criminals who seek to destabilize our nation. Like Senator Ricketts said, let's not forget the words of the Obama-Biden DHS Secretary Jay Johnson, who stated in 2009 that 1,000 illegal crossings a day overwhelms the system. So at this 2,500 number, the system will be overwhelmed. And again, we're not going to be able to keep track of the known or unknown gotaways. Joe Biden's decisions are basically rubber stamping the presence of cartel and criminal enterprises at our borders and really throughout the entire nation now. This is not a policy. This is a betrayal of the American people by the White House. It's high time we demand accountability and real solutions to secure our borders and protect our nation.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn, for putting together this press conference. And as my colleagues have stated, we have seen a real crisis in the United States. And why? It didn't have to happen. On day one of his presidency, Joe Biden rolled into the White House, he got into the Oval, and he dismantled everything that President Trump had in place that kept a lid on these illegal border crossings. So now here we are years later, and it has taken 10 million illegal border crossings for President Biden to step up and acknowledge that there is a crisis at the border. And you know what, folks? It's his own making. He really could have used his authority all along. We all know that. And yet he chose to do absolutely nothing about it. So why is he doing it now? Well, folks, you don't have to be that intelligent to see what's going on. We have an election just a few months away, and this is the #1 issue across the United States. In Iowa, it's gone back and forth between the border and inflation, both caused by President Joe Biden. But right now, you ask Iowans, what's the major issue on the horizon? And they will tell you it is our southern border. So Biden halted border wall construction that was underway. Build the border. That's what we saw in the Trump administration. He reinstated catch and release. He's just dumping illegal border crossers into the United States. He has been selling off the materials purchased to build the wall for pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar, taxpayer dollars. And the Democrats have blocked Sarah's Law, which is really important to me. Sarah Root was killed by an illegal alien years and years ago. And we have been trying to do something about this, and yet we see Democrats in cahoots with Joe Biden saying, no way, just let these violent illegals go free. And you know what? Again, this is all a stunt. It's a political stunt. You know, there's doublespeak in the White House. We hear it all the time. You know, I'll give you some examples. I have an ironclad commitment to Israel. Oh, but let's support Hamas and the Palestinians in their protests. Let's block weapons from going to Israel. Let's put sanctions on Iran. Oh, but let's not enforce them. Well, here we have it again. Yet once again, another stunt. Another stunt. Oh, let's do an executive order on the border. But, you know, let's make it so it really doesn't do a darn thing. It just helps us get through to November. This is such a ridiculous point in time. People are seeing through it. Iowans are seeing through it. This is just a joke. Let's do something about the border. And you know what? I think we're going to have to wait until January when President Trump comes back into office to actually see something done about it.
The American people are living the results of this open border. Every town is a border town. Every state is a border state. And it is all because Joe Biden's border policy is an open border. And we have seen that from day one. Just look at the 94 executive actions that he took in his first 100 days. 94 that opened up the border and made legal immigration more difficult and opened the way for illegal immigration. Indeed, you could say that one of the focuses of this administration has been to make illegal legal. Think about it. We have an American president who is choosing to find ways to help people circumvent the rule of law. That is what this administration is doing. And you need to look no further than Biden's border policy by the numbers. The 94 executive actions, the 10 million illegal aliens that have crossed into this country, the over 350 known terrorists, 350, that have come to that southern border. Then you have the 350 aliens who entered and were trying to get asylum, and their cases are dismissed. They are free to stay. 350,000. Start to add up these numbers. It gives you the number one issue with the American people, which is the open southern border. It is the 108,000 drug deaths from last year, people that are dying of fentanyl, the crime that is in our streets, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking. The numbers are adding up. And here you go with an election year political gimmick to try to push this issue aside so that he can go to a debate and say, well, I did something. You're right. He did do something. He did it on day one by dismantling a secure border that President Trump had handed over to him and turning it into an open border where we do not know who is coming into the country or the reason that they are coming into the country.
Joe Biden and the Democrats have presided over a criminal invasion of the United States of America. We are facing the worst illegal immigration our nation has ever seen. 11 million illegal immigrants have come in, invited by the Democrats. When Joe Biden came into office, he inherited the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. All he had to do was nothing, just sit there and stare at the wall. But instead, he deliberately broke the system. This chart on the right shows when Biden came into office, you had historic lows the instant he was sworn in. The numbers skyrocketed. It went from the lowest rate in 45 years to today, the highest rate in the history of our nation. This is deliberate. Now today, he could have stopped this every single day of his presidency. When he signs this executive order, the only question anyone should ask is, why didn't you do this in 2021? Why didn't you do this in 2022? Why didn't you do this in 2023? Why didn't you do this last month or the month before or the month before? You want to understand the consequences? Take a look at the 2 police officers in New York who were shot this week by an illegal alien that Joe Biden and the Democrats released. The assailant, Bernardo Raul Castro Mata. It's a name really out of Charles Dickens. Mata is Spanish for he kills. His middle name is a communist murdering dictator. And what happened? He came illegally from Venezuela. He came to John and my home state of Texas. He came to Eagle Pass. We had him apprehended. And what did he do? He did what Joe Biden and the Democrats have done for 3.5 years. He let him go. He let him go. And Mr. Mata went to New York City and shot 2 New York cops this week. That's happening every single week. We have not had a week go by when someone is not shot, someone is not murdered, a child is not raped by an illegal immigrant released by Joe Biden and the Democrats. Now, understand what is going on here. This is election year politics. And by the way, we've seen this game before. Apparently the Democrats have one playbook, which is create a crisis, and then a couple of months before the election, do something very mild to address the crisis and say, see, problem solved. We saw this with gas prices. Right before the last election, gas prices had doubled. People were hurting. And what did he do? Right before the election, he releases oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Gas prices fell a little bit. And understand on this chart, I'm actually going to pull this chart over here because what they're doing is unusually cynical. He came in here, the numbers skyrocketed here, 4,000 a day is 120,000. So we're right here. He's proposing to lower it to right here, to lower it just a bit.
Well, let's do the math. Open border, closed border. You come into office, President Biden comes into office, 70 executive orders on the border and immigration. 10+ million people come in illegally across our border. Now, 5 months before the election, he's going to issue an order, an executive order, that's supposedly going to secure the border. Except it doesn't. Check it out. I mean, it doesn't even begin until you have more than 1 million people coming here illegally on top of the million that come legally. So do the math. What's this really about? How can you argue the actual numbers? Look at the numbers. Furthermore, how is this going to secure the border? He's got all these exceptions, and he refuses to enforce remain in Mexico or third safe country, or build the border wall. So this is just more talk for the campaign. 5 months before the campaign, he comes out with one executive order after issuing 70 throughout his administration, allowing more than 10 million plus people in here, 169 on the terrorist watch list. And you heard what Senator Cruz just said about the recent shooting of 2 policemen in New York City from an illegal immigrant who was in custody and was released.
How bad does it have to get? How bad does it have to get before we look through the campaign, rhetoric, and lip service and secure this border? And it's this simple. It's this simple. All President Biden has to do is enforce the law. Enforce the law, enforce the law. Third safe country, remain in Mexico. Now you do that, and maybe we can have a serious discussion about this administration doing something other than continue to promote open borders so that he can get elected and run that spigot wide open again.
Question. Senator Cornyn, I mean, timing aside, are you happy with some of the contents of this executive order? Is this a step in the right direction, albeit, a late one?
No, it's a fig leaf. He has absolutely no intention of actually enforcing any of this. If he did, he would have enforced the law, as we've heard time and time again, at the beginning of his administration, rather than piecemeal dismantle through all these executive orders you've heard about the existing border security protection. So this is not an improvement. This is a fig leaf, and I think the American people are not going to be fooled. Yes, ma'am.
Out of curiosity, you've obviously worked with Democrats before on a number of issues, including trying to negotiate something on the border. Did you hear anything from the Biden administration? Did they ask for any input ahead of this executive order today?
Well, passing legislation is hard, and sometimes it takes a long, concerted effort. But the Biden administration basically is not engaged at all. They claim that a single negotiation that occurred a few months ago was supposed to be some panacea. The problem is, if they aren't enforcing current law, what gives you any confidence they will enforce any new laws? And that's another reason why I think this executive order is just political cover, and the American people aren't going to be fooled. Ted, why don't you take the question?
You criticize this move as a political play. How would you respond to the administration's assertion that the rejection of the Senate border deal in February was a political play by Republicans?
It's totally false. The Democrats' border legislation was terrible. The Democrats' border legislation that Chuck Schumer put forward was actually designed, it was the same thing as this executive order. It was political camouflage. Understand what this Democrat legislation did. It would have codified, it would have put into federal law Joe Biden's catch and release, the practice when they apprehend an illegal immigrant, they let him go. By the way, it means Mr. Mata, who just shot 2 police officers, under the Democrat legislation, he would have been released. He would have been in New York. He would have shot those 2 cops. It puts into law that illegal immigrants, when they're released, automatically get a work permit. So it ends up benefiting illegal immigrants and attracting even more.
President Biden is for open borders. President Biden wants open borders. The evidence is there. It's right in front of you. He can close the border right now. All he has to do is enforce existing law. It's as plain as the nose on your face. He wants open borders, and he won't agree to anything that actually secures the border.
They had their shot. They chose not to take it. Donald Trump left them a secure border. There are the numbers on Ted's chart. They chose never to take an action that would keep those numbers low.
Because every Democrat goes home and pretends they don't want this problem to happen, but they all want it. And the reason is they look at that invasion and they see future Democrat voters. This is all about power. This is the most cynical decision I've ever seen. Listen, every one of us here has been down to the border multiple times. I'll tell you, when you look in the eyes of a little girl or a little boy who's been brutalized, who's been abused by human traffickers, when you see women who've been repeatedly raped, it's evil. And every Democrat votes in favor.
There's growing outrage after a New York Times investigation which found that many migrant children who come to the U.S. without their parents here are working 12-hour shifts or more at factories, even though it violates child labor laws. The Times found that, quote, migrant child labor benefits both under-the-table operations and global corporations. In Los Angeles, children stitch Made in America tags into J. Crew shirts. They bake dinner rolls sold at Walmart and Target. They process milk used in Ben and Jerry's ice cream and help debone chicken sold at Whole Foods. As recently as the fall, middle schoolers made Fruit of the Loom socks in Alabama. In Michigan, children make auto parts used by Ford and General Motors.
I mean, really what I uncovered is a migrant child labor scandal in America. Kids have been coming across the border in record numbers. More than 300,000 of these kids have come here just since Biden took office. And whereas they used to mostly come and be reunited with their parents, most are now actually going to relatives, distant relatives, sometimes even strangers. And they're ending up in these horrible situations where they're on the hook for rent, for living expenses. A lot of them are in debt to the people that they're living with, and they have to go work the most punishing jobs in the country. So I talked to, like you say, more than 100 kids who are working illegally in jobs they should never have been in. I talked to them outside of meat processing plants,
on the top of 3-story buildings where they were doing roofing. But what I'm finding is this is happening more and more, and all signs are, thousands of children, even more, are going to be in this situation.
The government knows they're here. How is this happening?
And these are not really undocumented children. They haven't come across the border and never been discovered. They've gone through a federal child welfare system where they are processed through shelters. The government is supposed to release them only to people who will take care of them and make sure that they're not exploited. But unlike the federal foster care system, these kids are placed with adults and then no one checks up on them again. They're sort of on their own.
3 little boys that died, were injured and died. One of them fell from a roof in construction. There you see them. Take a look at these faces. So this is, exploitation, but who knows what some of these people are subjecting children to, by the thousands in our country.
But what we found is that kids are getting terribly injured. Their legs are getting ripped off in chicken processing plants. They're shattering their backs, falling from roofs. And like you say, we found at least 12 cases recently in which these kids have been killed. And even when they're not physically injured, they're threatened. I talked to one boy who had been forced to sleep in a basement. It's just appalling conditions.
And these are, as you say, these are kids that went through the process. Imagine that.
If you think that a drug cartel is nothing more than a collection of ruthless, drug-fueled killers, then you don't really understand how a modern drug cartel operates. It actually helps, as crazy as this might sound, to think of them more as a Fortune 500 company. Cartels are an organization looking for ways of diversifying its income, diversifying its commodities that it moves and does business in. Drug cartels aren't just in the business of moving drugs north, they've actually expanded. They're into kidnapping, extortion, weapons smuggling, and the scariest of all, human smuggling. Now think about these numbers. The US government says that some 50,000 people have migrated from Central America into the United States in this latest immigration crisis. We're told by sources that many of these people have been paying up to $8,000 per person. 50,000 people times $8,000 a head is $400 million. Now, one of the reasons that human smuggling is so enticing to drug cartels is that, unlike drugs, humans come back. Drugs move north and either get confiscated or consumed. They don't exist anymore. You can't make money on that commodity again. But humans, when they move north, oftentimes get deported right back where they started and often very willing to shell out that money again. So it's a cycle that repeats itself.
Ms. Chung, you've served as United States Attorney in Pennsylvania. You're also on the Attorney General's Advisory Committee. You have spoken publicly about the Attorney General's TEN initiative, Trafficking Ends Now. Do you think it's important to stop human trafficking?
Senator, as United States Attorney, we have dedicated many resources to prosecuting trafficking, human trafficking.
Let me ask you, to what extent do you think the Biden administration's refusal to enforce the law, which has resulted in 3.5 million people crossing illegally in the last year and a half, the highest rate of illegal immigration in 62 years, to what extent has that lawlessness from the department in which you work right now contributed to and fueled the human trafficking crisis we're seeing?
Well, Senator, when I take up as a prosecutor, now as United States Attorney, supervise human trafficking cases, they're very fact-specific as to each case.
Would human trafficking be less if the Biden administration enforced the law?
Well, Senator, there is trafficking across borders, but also within our borders, so I would have to...
Does catch and release contribute to human trafficking?
Senator, I do not have enough research or study on that to
know
the answer.
You've been the chief prosecutor for a significant portion of Pennsylvania, and you don't know whether 3.5 million people come in illegally because the Biden DOJ won't enforce the law. You don't know if that contributes to trafficking?
Senator, again, when we address human trafficking, it is on a case-to-case basis.
To the border right now, shocking new claims from anti-human trafficking activist and Tim Ballard. You know his story. It's portrayed in the box office hit Sound of Freedom, the movie everybody's talking about. He shared this video just a couple of days ago and made this bold claim. I could not ignore it, alleging that thousands, tens of thousands of unaccompanied migrant children are now unaccounted for, the U.S. releasing them to unvetted sponsors. But these are not host families. Ballard says this is the last leg of sex trafficking between the cartels and within America's own borders.
Talking about Sound of Freedom, about Ballard's efforts to combat child sex trafficking is drawing huge crowds nationwide. Now, Ballard did make some astonishing claims in a new video posted on Instagram. I dig into some of the data he cited, and we have reaction from the federal government. Take a look.
You know what happens? I've been down there. The traffickers give the kids a little piece of paper with a name on it.
of the sponsor.
Anti-human trafficking activist Tim Ballard sounding the alarm about what he says is a failure by the U.S. government to vet migrant sponsors before they turn young children over into their custody. This, he says, is fueling sex trafficking here in the States.
And Health and Human Services gets those kids, by policy, all they can do is call the number, and George Smith or whoever picks up the phone, oh yeah, Jose Gonzalez, yeah, I'm the sponsor.
NewsNation actually witnessing this firsthand at the Texas border in March.
Basically instructions on where he wants to go.
Speaking to a prominent conservative conference, Ballard pinning the blame on the U.S. government for allegedly transporting these migrant kids directly to alleged child sex traffickers working with Central American cartels.
The United States government is therefore complicit, and the United States government is fulfilling and completing the final leg of a child trafficking experience.
Federal officials continue to be overwhelmed by the number of unaccompanied minors reaching the southern border. Under the Biden administration in the past 2 years, more than 250,000 unaccompanied minors entered the U.S. Most of the time, the Department of Health and Human Services transfers unaccompanied minors to an approved family member, but that's not always the case. But in 2021, the same year vetting restrictions were loosened for sponsors, over 16,000 unaccompanied minors were released to distant relatives or non-family sponsors. And according to the New York Times, more than 85,000 children released inside the U.S. cannot be reached by the Health and Human Services for the routine follow-up a month after living with their sponsor. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra said in April, quote, "I have never heard of that number of 85,000. I don't know where this comes from, and if so, I would say it doesn't sound at all to be realistic." But it's this report that Ballard cites as clear evidence of child sex and labor trafficking.
In Sound of Freedom, the movie based on Ballard's anti-sex trafficking work continues its underdog success. The movie came in this weekend at second, just behind Mission Impossible, and so far it has ranked in $90 million in the box office.
A concerning trend continues in Arizona.
Federal authorities rescued nearly 100 illegal migrants from a West Phoenix apartment complex. Immigration advocates say human trafficking of migrants continues to plague the valley. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rachel Cole, in tonight for Caribe Divine.
And I'm Mark Curtis. Thanks for joining us. Team 12's Jonathan McCall is in Phoenix tonight with the concern from immigration attorneys and how they say the problem can be fixed. Jonathan?
A top immigration attorney says even though we're not seeing daily headlines of dozens of people being rescued from stash houses across Phoenix, she says the problem of human smuggling here in the valley is still very much a big problem.
It's in Glendale, it's in Mesa, it's in little communities in Tucson, it's all over the state.
And recently in Phoenix, federal investigators found 79 undocumented migrants from Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras at this West Phoenix apartment complex. Investigators say 7 more were found in a car nearby.
We have smart traffickers who are here in the U.S. who know to move people from house to house, and it is a moving target for law enforcement.
It's a problem immigration attorney Hillary Walsh says that she sees each and every day, and it's only getting worse. She says migrants typically pay tens of thousands of dollars to get to the country. Once here, they're moved from stash house to stash house, many times groups crammed together. She says recent headlines of 50 people found dead in an 18-wheeler in San Antonio shows the dangerous and potentially deadly drive for human flesh. According to Walsh, with Border Patrol agents tasked with multiple jobs, it makes it easier for the trade to continue. However, she says it may not be the end of the road.
Someone is apprehended at a stash house, they're oftentimes going to be taken into ICE custody, where they have the right to seek asylum and protection from being deported from their home country.
The couple lured their victims with dreams of a better life in America, but instead held them against their will and forced them to be sex slaves. Today, the couple accused of operating a human trafficking ring faced a judge, and they're asking the judge to let them out of jail.
My prosecution? Rosalia Leonard Garcia and her co-defendant, Ahmed Macaria de la Cal, have been in jail since last October. The couple was busted for running a human sex trafficking ring in Tampa, and now they want out of jail. The statewide prosecutor wants them locked up until their trial and plans to fight their bond request. The judge has set a bond hearing for June. Prosecutors say this is the room where 8 women were held against their will and forced to work as sex slaves. They say Garcia and Macaria smuggled the women from Cuba for $60,000 and made them work off their debt. Back in October, Sheriff Chad Chronister said it was the worst case of human trafficking he had ever seen.
This organized criminal enterprise was nothing short of modern-day slavery.
Court records show the couple have 2 children together, and while Garcia waited for her case to be called, wiped away tears when she spotted her family in the gallery. Now both accused sex traffickers want to go home, but first, they have to convince a judge.
And this morning, we're speaking with Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd about a massive human trafficking sting that was dubbed Operation March Sadness. A record 288 people arrested, including suspected illegal immigrants. A teacher, coaches, even active duty military members were caught up in this sting. And Sheriff Judd is joining us this morning to talk more about this. So, Sheriff Judd, there were some very disturbing, troubling parts of this story. What were some of the biggest things that disturbed you about this sting operation?
We had so many just jaw-dropping moments. And then you focus on the 21 people that were here illegally. That's right. Let me give you just a snapshot of 3 of, we believe, human trafficking victims. They wanted to come to the United States. So the human trafficker arranged for them to come here illegally. And then they got a voucher from DHS, flew to Yonkers, New York. She set up their prostitution stings. She had a handler that went with them every place. And she said, on Friday, you give me $3,000 apiece. So for just these 3 people, who knows how many she was working, she made $9 grand a week. And she made sure they flew around the country. So we asked them, well, you came from New York to Tampa to Lakeland. Is that correct? Yes. How'd you get here? Well, we had this voucher from DHS. They told us they're flying around the country on this federal voucher. So get a load of this. They are flying around the country on a federal voucher to turn prostitution stings, and the girls aren't free to leave because they've got to pay back. That is a scary thing. We have them being victims. Even though they're here illegally, they're victimized. We have the people all throughout this country that are violating the law and are potentially exposed to HIV. The border's wide open. Fentanyl's coming across. The drugs are all over killing our people. And then we catch our own military people, a staff sergeant in the operation, another airman first class out of MacDill, who is also a police officer for the military, and he's here with illegal people, supposedly having sex. You know, it's just a shock.
And you guys do these sting operations all the time, and as you said in your news conference, you're going to continue to do them. And I think one of the things that you said that, you know, maybe a lot of people took a chuckle at was that, you know, it's hard to believe that people continue to fall for this stuff.
The rest of them came from throughout, not only Central Florida, we had people from like 12 different states that were in Central Florida for whatever reason and decided, hey, they'd pick up someone. You know, we had a guy tell us, well, Monday I got to go to the county jail for 10 days, so I just wanted some stress relief before I went to jail. We had a wife call us and thank us for arresting her husband. She said, now maybe we can get our marriage put back together.
And Sheriff, we're showing, you know, this widescreen shot of all the arrests that you made. I assume that all of the ones that are in black or that you can't see their faces, those are some of the victims that you found.
Absolutely. Those are the potential human trafficking victims. And we work with our NGOs, our mental health counselors from the community. We have them at the operation. So we start screening them for being a victim of human trafficking from the moment the transaction occurs. And then they follow them for weeks and months. A lot of these folks don't admit that they're victims because they're more afraid of their human trafficker or their pimp than they are of the criminal justice system and law enforcement. But when our NGOs work with them over the next weeks and months, you cannot believe how successful they've been in rescuing these people. Oh, and by the way, did I tell you the human trafficker that we believe are running these 3 illegal folks is an illegal Dominican female out of South Florida. We're hot on her trail. If she doesn't get her butt on an airplane and leave this country, we're going to have her locked up before long. With us all working together, we will keep Florida safe, I promise.
Thank you, Sheriff Judd.
Ms. Marcos, can I just start with you? You testified a moment ago to Senator Butler that every child gets a Know Your Rights presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that before or after you release them to labor traffickers?
Senator, every child that comes into our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation as well as...
Have you read these New York Times reports, these stories, the series of stories the New York Times has done on the children who are in your care? Have you read them?
Yes, I have.
Have you read that children are scrubbing dishes, they are operating heavy machinery, they are delivering meals, they are harvesting coffee, they are working construction, they are working as housekeepers, they are working overnight shifts at plants where they are not paid, they are not going to school, they are not cared for, they are not giving meals, almost all of it illegally. Are you aware of that? That's a yes or no?
Yes.
Do the Know Your Rights presentation help them in those situations?
Senator, ORR...
That's a yes or no, I think. Do you really think that you're helping these children by releasing them to labor traffickers and, yes, sex traffickers? 85,000 children whom you have no contact with, and your answer is, we gave them a presentation before we turned them over to these people who are exploiting them on a scale not seen in this country for 100 years, a century. It's a disgrace in the United States of America. Let me ask you this. You did an audit, I noticed, where you gave yourself a clean bill of health. So just tell me this. Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Senator, we have a thorough vetting process.
Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Yes, we go through.
No, you do not. You do not. Have you read the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations reports on your office? There was one in 2016. There was one in 2018. There was one in 2020. There was one in 2022. Spanning administrations, what they found is you do not require sponsors to document their relationship with the child. You release them anyway. What about background checks? Do you require background checks on all adults in the household?
In cases where the child is being released to their parents, we do not require background checks. But Senator,
do you require background checks on all adults in the household in any case?
Yes, in some cases we do.
What percentage of cases do you do background checks on the adults in the household?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Do you do home visits in all cases? You can actually see where these children are being released, whose care you're putting them in?
We do not do home visits in all cases. Senator, I'd really like the opportunity to talk about what we are doing.
I know what you're doing, and it's incredibly and totally inadequate. And we can read about it in the New York Times. Since you say you've read it, let's talk a little bit about that New York Times report if we could. Here's a quote from the April 17th installment. Again and again, veteran government staffers and outside contractors told HHS, including reports that reached the secretary, that children appeared to be at risk. Did you warn the secretary that children were at risk?
Senator, I'm in regular contact with the secretary.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
Safety and well-being of children is our top priority.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
I'm not going to get into the conversations I've had.
You're here and you're under oath, and this is an oversight hearing. And we need to know what you're doing, because you're manifestly not doing your job. Did you warn him that children were at risk? Do you believe that children are at risk? Let's start with that.
Yes.
Okay, did you warn the secretary?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics of my conversation, but I would like the opportunity
Why wouldn't you warn the secretary that children were at risk?
I would like the opportunity to talk about what we
Let's look at what the secretary said to you. At least 5 HHS staff members said they were pushed out after raising concerns about child safety. Mr. Becerra, the secretary, told the ORR director, that's you, right, that if she could not increase the number of discharges, he would find someone who could. And then he went on to say that if Henry Ford had run his plants like this, he would never have become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line. Get the kids out, run them through, get them out to those sponsors, those traffickers. Why didn't you resign when he said this? Do you think that this is morally acceptable?
Senator, I joined ORR in September of 2022. I believe that was reported prior to my arrival, but I cannot speak.
This is from an article this year.
I can't speak to what the secretary.
Do you think that this is acceptable to run ORR like an assembly line and to release these children to traffickers?
We do not run ORR like an assembly line. The safety and well-being of children is our top concern, and by
plainly not. Plainly, it is not your top concern because you have managed to lose 85,000 of them, and the Times knows where they are, or 2/3 of them, and they're with labor traffickers. It's unbelievable. Let me just ask you this: how many kids right now, the 430,000 approximately, unaccompanied children across the border under this administration? It's an astounding number. How many are you in regular contact with right now?
Senator, we have a number of different providers across the country.
But what's the number? What's the number? How many of you are you in? You said child welfare is your top concern. What's the number?
I don't have the specific number.
How can you not know? Why would you come to this hearing and not know?
Respectfully, if you would like us to provide comprehensive case management to children after they're released from our care, so we can report.
Respectfully, I would like you to do your job and not release children to human traffickers. Respectfully, that's what I would like. I'd like you not facilitate the largest child trafficking ring in American history.
I'd like you not facilitate the largest child trafficking ring in American history.
I'd like you not facilitate the largest child trafficking ring in American history.
In 2021, Georgia had one of the highest number of cases per capita that were reported through trafficking hotlines. The northern area of Atlanta is well known. It's one of the highest places of human trafficking, human sex trafficking of women and children. Women and girls represent approximately 71% of all trafficking victims globally. More than 90% of detected female victims are trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Approximately 1/3 of all human trafficking victims are children. This next sentence is hard to even read because it's our country. The United States is one of the top destinations for human trafficking and is among the largest consumers of child sex. The average age of entry into the commercial sex market is 12 years old. In the past few weeks, there's been a lot of controversy about a movie called Sound of Freedom. And I can't understand why anyone would say anything negative about a movie that's trying to expose child sex trafficking, especially when it involves our United States border. Ms. Vaughn, can you tell me, is it a conspiracy theory? Is child sex trafficking a conspiracy theory?
It is most certainly not a conspiracy theory. It occurs far too much. I have met with and hugged survivors and heard what they have gone through, and to refer to it as a conspiracy is an insult to what they have endured.
Is our border a serious issue? The fact that our border is open and the amount of people coming across our border, is that contributing to child sex trafficking?
It is most definitely contributing to the problem of not only child sex trafficking, but forced labor and domestic servitude and debt bondage, as we've discussed today.
Is our current administration's border policies contributing to child sex trafficking?
They are certainly facilitating it, yes. So it's happening with more frequency as a result of the loose policies at the border and the lack of enforcement, frankly, in the interior of the country as well, that would help rescue some of these survivors and, or at least turn them into survivors as opposed to victims.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott now joins us. And sir, good morning to you. Specific question. Has the state of Texas asked whether or not they could talk to these migrants to get more information from them as to whether or not they've been subjected to traffickers along the way?
I have. So I made a direct plea to the Biden administration a couple of days ago for Texas and our professionals in this state that deal with human trafficking all the time to have access to these minors who have come across the border to learn more about how they were trafficked here. And then we received word yesterday from the Biden administration that they would allow no such thing because they want to continue the cover-up that you've been talking about. There are two things that the Biden administration is trying to hide from the American public. One is the massive number of people who are coming across the border and the Biden administration's lack of preparation to deal with this massive number. The second thing they want to hide is this, and that is that with every person coming across the border, it empowers and it enriches the drug cartels who are involved in every single person coming across the border, including these young children. These young children coming across the border are victims of human trafficking. Somebody has to get to the bottom of it. That's exactly what I wanted to do, not only as governor, but with our professionals in the state of Texas who deal with human trafficking all the time, learn about who trafficked these kids into the state, who in the state of Texas is involved in this so that we can go out and arrest them and stop this human trafficking. This is a crisis that's being made worse by the fact that the Biden administration is subjecting even more children to coming to Texas or coming across our border who are going to be victimized by these cartels and the cartel gang members who could harm these children along the way.
Just to be clear, they could be subjected to sex crimes. And
absolutely,
if you as the governor of the state want to look into that, you can't find that out and help them.
Exactly. So every day in our office, we have a child sex trafficking office in the governor's office in the state of Texas. We also have human trafficking operations in the attorney general's office that crack down on crimes like this in the state of Texas all the time. These professionals are being denied the ability to crack down on the human trafficking that these children are being subjected to on the trek to the United States.
And they're being tracked once they get here. I also wanted to ask you about this because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and Secretary Mayorkas yesterday at a hearing basically said they have released migrants into the country that have COVID. Watch.
There were times earlier when individuals were apprehended and we sought to expel them, and we were unable to expel them, and we were compelled to release them, and we did not have the opportunity to test them. We have addressed that situation.
Have they addressed the situation, sir?
They have begun to. However, Dana, this is another cover-up and try to cast the blame elsewhere by the Biden administration. If you kind of go back 1 and 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration made it sound like it was my fault as the governor of Texas that these children and the other people coming across the border were not being tested. I said it is the Biden administration's responsibility to do this. Now Mayorkas and other Biden administration officials are acknowledging the fact that there are people coming across the border who are being released. And remember this, one of the greatest challenges we're facing with regard to the pandemic right now are all these different variants. One of the variants is coming from Brazil. There are others coming from elsewhere. We need to know exactly which countries all of these people are coming from, what variants they may have been exposed to, how many people are testing positive who are coming across the border. We've tried to contain the spread of COVID-19 in the state of Texas. Now the Biden administration is importing more COVID into the U.S. that they could be keeping out if they were securing the border.
To be clear, Governor, the Biden administration did not like the policies on behalf of the Trump administration, so they changed them starting on Inauguration Day, and they did it in the middle of a pandemic. Does that make sense to you?
It's a total disaster. It would be a disaster anytime, but during the time of a worldwide pandemic, and Bill, remember that one of the worst countries in the world for the spread of COVID, one of the so-called red zones and hot zones, is Mexico. So many of these people are not from Mexico, but they travel through Mexico, and they would be exposed to COVID in Mexico. And so what the Biden administration is doing is, on the one hand, trying to solve the pandemic in the United States, but on the other hand, import more of the pandemic into our country. That is reprehensible. And I will add, they are not stepping up. But also think of all the people that these people who just come across the border have exposed themselves to.
Just a week ago, the New York Times reported that the Biden administration has downplayed repeated signs that migrant children are being widely exploited. You said these kids are being recruited in their home country. What do you mean by that?
So, and I'd be happy to submit for the record, we have children saying that there are radio advertisements in their hometowns. So in Huehuetenango, for example, in Guatemala, they're actually advertising on the radio. Come with us. We'll give you passage. We'll give you passage to the United States. There's an example of a sponsor who currently is in Austin, Texas at this moment. He attempted to sponsor 4 children, 1 from the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site and 3 from the Pecos Emergency Intake Site, promising work to these children who are making $2.50 a day on the coffee farm he owns in Guatemala. So he lured them here. Now, fortunately, they were put into long-term care, but they are being lured here. Facebook ads and other things. Children are being lured here and then put to work here.
So it doesn't sound like they're fleeing as much as they're being baited to come here in a lot of ways, from what I'm hearing.
In many ways, they're not fleeing. In many ways, I mean, let's take El Salvador, for example. No one is fleeing from Nayib Bukele. He has a very safe society right now. Yes, maybe in times past, people were fleeing El Salvador from the gangs, but sadly, the gangs have now set up operation here, and we have evidence that there are many of them who are running the networks here who have the children. It's indisputable evidence that Department of Homeland Security has transnational criminal organizations on the TOC watch list, some of who got their fingerprints here in Washington, D.C., in neighboring areas, are sponsoring the children. It's indisputable.
You mentioned, too, debt bondage. What do you mean when you say debt bondage, and who does the money go to?
So the money goes to the trafficker who ultimately brings them here. The New York Times actually showed, I think Hannah Dreier did an amazing expose where she actually showed the debt page of the child, how much the child had to pay for food, how much the child had to pay for rent, all of those things.
So the administration is really, we're engaged in creating slavery. We are trafficking slaves to this country.
Absolutely. There is no doubt. We have created a pull, and because this criminal element tragically views children as a commodity, they see us as the middleman because we're paying the flight directly to the end user, the trafficker.
I remember. I was at Fort Bliss Emergency Intake Center. I mentioned this last week in a hearing, and I was there as they were shipping kids on buses all over the country. And I actually asked the admiral running the place, I said, are we doing background checks? We're sending these kids to Google addresses. And he's like, no, we're just building the bus as we drive it. And so they were just shipping children. American taxpayers, basically, we're trafficking children.
Yes.
And making the cartel wealthy in the process and creating a bunch of minors in bad situations.
Yes, going back to 2014, which was astounding to me because I did not know when I deployed for this mission that one child had ever been trafficked through the program. So the horror when someone sent me the 2016 Senate report, I'm sitting there on the Pomona site seeing all these strange things and all these multiple sponsors at multiple addresses trying to collect these kids from multiple sites. And I read the report and I thought, which side am I on?
Right. Which side are you on?
Which side? Because we know about trafficking all the way back then, how teens were lured from Guatemala, put in slave labor conditions where they were held sometimes at gunpoint and their families were threatened to be killed.
So I've got about 45 seconds. Thank you for being a whistleblower. I guess they didn't treat you very nicely when you blew the whistle out.
No, they did not. They threatened me with investigation. They walked me off the emergency intake site and they took my badge. My agency, thankfully, I work for the Council of the Inspectors General. I'm not here in that capacity, but they actually offered to send agents to retrieve me, to escort me home because they were concerned for my safety. It's a terrible thing when you blow the whistle and to try to save children, and then you are retaliated against for trying to help. HHS did everything they could to keep all of this silent.
Let me ask one more question. You said these kids, that they talk about always sending them to their moms and their dads. You're saying they hand them a piece of paper and tell them this is your mom and this is your dad. Is that what I gathered from the testimony?
Well, as they're making their journey, that happens, but then also the case managers who are not law enforcement, right? They're not investigative. They are receiving documents, photographs of documents on their WhatsApp phone. And there's a perfect example. A 20-plus-year-old man sponsored what we believed was his sister, who was only 16 years old. He submitted a birth certificate for himself and her as brother and sister. And then, about 10 days after she's released, we see she's for sale on his WhatsApp page. You know, her shirt is buttoned down to her navel. She's all made up. The documents, there is no one at HHS vetting the children who is
That's what we need law
capable to
enforcement.
determine.
About a 4-year-old little boy, and a sad ending to a very sad story. He was born in Haiti to a mother who didn't want him. And so he was adopted in Haiti by this lady whose sister was in the United States. It took 3 years for the adoption process to go through, and ultimately the 4-year-old ended up here in the United States. It's called the Biden program, and supposedly it's a sped up adoption.
It's called the Biden program, and supposedly it's a sped up adoption.
It's called the Biden program, and supposedly it's a sped up adoption.
So the child's born to a mother who doesn't want it. We have no idea who that mother is. The sister of our suspect is in the process of getting the child for her sister, who is Patricia St. Azaire. Patricia's 36 years of age. She's already got a 16-year-old son that she has adopted from Haiti. The 4-year-old comes here as a 3-year-old only a year ago. And what we've learned during this investigation just turns our stomach. We have a video clip of where that 3-year-old baby's hands was tied behind his back, and she threw him in a swimming pool in the backyard. We received on May 1st a call. May 1st, the child went to the hospital. So why did the child go to the hospital? Heart of Florida and Haines City, but they live in Davenport. The little fella got off of the bus. He was happy. Everything seemed to be all right. The 16-year-old noticed he was happy. They were home. Patricia, the 16-year-old, and now the little dead fella who's 4. The 16-year-old notices later on that he's lethargic, that he's not responding. Patricia says he's faking it. Give him something to eat. He can't eat. He goes unconscious. The 16-year-old has been saying he needs to go to the hospital. He needs to go to the hospital. He needs to go to the hospital. Heart of Florida thinks he has a significant issue, sends him to Orlando Health. Orlando Health tries to work with him, and ultimately he dies. He goes to the medical examiner's office, and that's when we get involved a couple of days later. We find injuries where this child has been beaten, in addition to the video we found in the investigation of his hands tied behind him and thrown into the pool. We found an injury where his spleen suffered a significant tear. The medical examiner said it could have been nothing else other than an immediate hard strike to the abdomen. And as the autopsy went on, they found different layers of bruises and injuries from past beatings. And he's dead. He's dead because she beat him to death. We don't know, obviously, how he got out of the pool after he was thrown in there with his hands tied behind his back. We have a video of that. We're going to show it to you at the end of this news release. She's charged with murder, aggravated child abuse. The investigation's still underway. Her husband was clearly at work at the time this event occurred. She was the disciplinarian. He was a student at Laufman Oaks, and despite his abusive treatment, they said he was a happy child. And this never should have happened. Ladies and gentlemen, it is beyond my wildest imagination how anyone could abuse a beautiful little fella like this child was abused and neglected. But the investigation is still ongoing. We don't believe we know all that this child suffered. We have another video clip where he's face down on the floor and she's beating him in the back. And he's not even resisting it. It's just like it's a normal occurrence. You know, the positive, if you search for a positive, is that he's in the arms of God right now. And he's no longer being beaten. He's no longer being punched. He's no longer being tied up and thrown in the swimming pool. That now he's, as our Christian belief, that he's living the life there where he's surrounded by love and things are great, like he should have been surrounded by love and things should have been great here on earth for him. So every day when you see these little guys and gals that are on their way to school, understand that there's a small percentage of them that are being neglected and abused, and we need to know about that immediately. And when you go home tonight, hug your children a little tighter, give them an extra kiss when you put them to bed, and thank God that you have those children and they are miracles, and that you have the opportunity to show them the right way, to raise them the right way, to teach them the right way, and then understand that we need to say prayers for these children that we have yet discovered. It would have been great if we could have found this child and rescued him before he was beaten to death. The 16-year-old is in protective custody at this time. He is obviously no longer at the home. Are there any questions?
Have there been any DCF calls or anything to this house, or anything that makes you guys...
That's still under investigation. I don't know if there were other DCF calls there or not, but our team, our homicide team, is simply the very best. These cases are difficult to work. Our victims deceased, we've got to work on timelines and time frames of injuries and types of injuries, and this was a very complicated case for them to work, and they're still gathering details and evidence.
How about with the school sheriff? When your investigators spoke with school officials, had they seen any warning signs? Is that on their radar at all?
I don't know if we've had a chance to circle around with the school officials yet to see if they've seen or heard anything, because we have been intensely investigating the instant event. That will be on part of the investigative protocol. But as you know, we release information as soon as it's reasonable so that you know what we know. And some of that investigation happens in the later stages of the investigation.
These videos, were they on the suspect's phone? Or
They were on the suspect's phone.
And the 16-year-old, was the 16-year-old abused or
The-
also
At this point in time, he looks fine. He was coached to lie to us when we first talked to him. After we got Patricia in jail and away from him, he then told us, hey, I was told to lie to you. So that will be part of the subsequent investigation, but there's no obvious instant injuries, but certainly that will be part of the follow-up investigation.
Do you think that Patricia could be facing more charges than the ones that are listed here?
Well, we've loaded her up with all of the charges that we know about right now, but certainly depending on what the rest of the investigation tells us, that you can be sure that my detectives will file every criminal charge possible, depending on where the rest of the investigation leads us.
So was her husband never around when this abuse took place?
Apparently not. You know, once again, those are the layers of the onion. We're not completely through yet, but at least when this injury that caused the death occurred, based upon the severeness of the injury and how bad that the child would have regressed from the injury, he was clearly not there. Now, follow-up investigation will help determine what he knew, when he knew it, if he knew it. But if you can believe this, they've lawyered up. So when you lawyer up, because we're investigating injuries to your child and you won't cooperate with us, that's a clue.
Sheriff, did she express remorse or explain her behavior to you?
Oh no, she didn't.
Sheriff, is there any more you can tell us about her personal and professional life or something on social media that could indicate she maybe worked with child care?
No, she worked for ABC Liquors in the corporate office, I'm told, over in Orlando. She lived in Davenport.
Do you know how long she lived in the States?
I don't know, but it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. But I can assure you of this, that if you hear something or see something or believe something or think something about a child being neglected or abused, if you call us, I can assure you that we'll completely and thoroughly investigate it with DCF. Because our number one goal in this organization is to protect the children. And that's why we go after child predators. That's why we go after pornographers. That's why we go after child abusers. And we certainly go after child murderers. Okay, this is where he's beaten him to death. That's not a corporal punishment spanking. That's a beating. Now, if we can show it slow and stop it, you'll be able to clearly see his hands tied behind his back. This makes me so angry I can't see straight. Back it up just a little bit. Maybe one more frame. You see his hands right there tied behind his back? And she grabs him by the arm and slings him into the pool. All right? If that's not enough to upset your day, nothing will be. Okay? See you later. It's called the Biden program, and supposedly it's a sped up adoption.
It's called the Biden program, and supposedly it's a sped up adoption.
It's called the Biden program, and supposedly it's a sped up adoption